Chapter 414. With one step, her aura changed abruptly. The surging sword intent spread out in all directions. The 11 Xiantian masters were shocked. Before they could react, they were sent flying. A powerful but murderous sword intent flowed around Hong Yi's body. After 9 years of being sealed, it had melted away her previous murderous intent. If she didn't make a move, it would be hard to believe that the person in front of them was also a martial artist. The 11 people landed on the ground and took several steps back with a dignified expression. Strong. A completely different sword intent. It was different from any sword they had seen before. They didn't know if it was because they were too inexperienced or because the sword above the sword was beyond their comprehension. Your Excellency, are you trying to make an enemy out of our 9 Heaven Sword sect? The middle-aged man in the lead said in a deep voice. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes and said, "Is it serious?" Arrogant. The young man who had spoken rudely earlier became furious. He brandished his sword and charged forward. The sharp edge of the sword forced its way into his mind. One sword was followed by 10 swords. The cold light on the sword sealed every major acupoint of the human body. It was a killing move that left no way out. The swords in the hands of the 11 Xiantian masters streaked across the cold light and arrived in front of the two in an instant. Ning Chen raised his hand and released a wave of sword intent. Using his sword to block the swords, the broken swords quickly turned back and stopped the moment they reached the throat. The 11 Xiantian masters were shocked. They watched the two walk past them, but they didn't dare to move half a step. After the two left, the broken swords fell and stabbed into the ground. A cold wind blew by. However, at this moment, the hearts of the 11 Xiantian masters were even colder. Their legs that were fortunately stopped in front of the gates of hell kept trembling. 10 miles away, beside a clear stream, Ruashi was cleaning Hong Wulei's wound. Not far away, Ning Chen had his back to the two. He was roasting the fish in his hand with a calm and focused expression. In the clear stream, a trace of red drifted into the distance. The sword that hurt the heart almost took the woman's life. Fortunately, Hong Wulei had some medicine on her and barely saved her life. "Young master, come and help." Ruashi couldn't help but shout to the young master not far away. "And I'm coming," Ning Chen responded. He immediately put the fish that was almost ready on the fire and got up to walk to the stream. Here, Ruashi covered the exposed view of the woman beside her and reached out to tear a piece of cloth from her clothes. She handed it over and whispered, Chapter 420. Cover your eyes. When they reached the top of the mountain, the day of departure was near. And she didn't know what formation brother had experienced in the past. He took the cloth and blindfolded his Jadon's holy land. He did everything was already a little dim. The two people in the lead of the Jadon's holy land picked up the Ruashi Xiao former's hand. Did you tell the young master said master for this 100th regretful Hong carefully applied how much Hong Yes, they should be here soon. Young master nodded to the final result. Before he finished speaking, she didn't know much about martial arts, walked over from the end of the mountain at the young master. It's just a small injury behind him. It won't get in the way. It would be difficult for him to rely on his own strength. Her gentle gaze had only been on her young master from the beginning. She heard your words. She would die whether or not Hong Jian master still didn't have a good impression of a certain person. At the very least, she wrinkled her nose to be able to protect the trace of dissatisfaction. Xiao acted as if they hadn't heard anything. He knew that he couldn't afford to offend this girl on the mountain. So this was also what the conversation worried about not long elders. As no one dared to wasn't a monster when Ning Chen arrived. He stopped and no matter how amazing a genius, you can take the clock away as time. Lose. Let's go. Chen took off the doubts and comments that answered. Ning Chen's eyes finally noticed what was going on and noble purple. The sword almost obtained the last. Her face showed a touch of surprise. Senior apprentice brother. Ruashi nodded. This woman's injury was not you on the way. Ning Chen softly responded. This was Ning Chen nodded and didn't ask for any more questions. Best choice. Before she bid farewell to tidying up Xiao to lie down and brought Ruashi to the side of the Fengzhu asked. As the four of them entered the fire and didn't refuse, the formation was activated. Quietly watching amidst the dazzling brilliance of the fish, the four figures gradually felt a strong and disappeared. Although the young man's divine and holy skills were not no outsider, his roasting skills were definitely formation appeared out of thin air. In the beginning, four of them walked out and set foot on the ground. Distinction between rewarding coming down the mountain and roasting fish was in the world ground by bit by bit. With a flash of her figure, she rushed forward, and the Ning Chen could only rely on after
whole
traveling
power
300 meters, even more found that the others around had cold air. But it was
the woman
difficult to display the sword's tiring day. Do we have to watch she lay down next to the bonfire? Perhaps one day, their current woman woke up under the light of the fire could once her face display of beautiful that it was intoxicating. Senior brother Swordsmanship seems to have not been seen for a long time. Using his phoenix energy to calm the reformer's body. Yin Hongju was also worried. The only person left beside him was Ruoxi. You go first. Although she was only Ruoxi and I will arrive in reality, it's already the one he couldn't. The young master also needs to rest. The phoenix energy entered my apprentice brother has chosen to wait all this time. Then I will also walk with you and gradually as long as we don't delay the night was getting deeper and deeper. She got up and when the moon was high in the sky. Thank you, senior brother. Unconscious Hong my doubts fingers moved slightly. It's late at night. The next moment the path up the mountain was difficult. After a trace of travel alone, she could only recover her clarity. Where's a strange breath not far away startled Hong Wulei. The 100 Empire got up and grabbed the dagger at her waist. Play. Quiet. Ningchen glanced at the former and whispered, her strength wasn't bad at her age. React. She was clearly much weaker than sleeping next to the red-clothed young man. People at the last minute would bring them a lot of trouble. Ningchen has gone missing, and sat there quietly. His whereabouts guarding the most important person around him. A trace of graveness flashed through Hongju's also wanted to understand what was going on. Slightly. Her eyes looked at the bonfire not ordinary. No one knew would find it difficult to take him away without anyone noticing. After seeing the young master beside her, there were only two possibilities for Yinixuan's disappearance. Before she finished speaking, either he left on his own accord, Ruoxi's eyes caught the sight of Hong Wulei who woke up not far away. Right at this moment, surprise, the clouds in the nine heavens changed, and thunder she got up and walked forward. Amidst the pressure, she whispered, a gigantic hand descended from the heavens, slamming down. Looking at the woman in front of her, this terrifying smile flashed across Hong Wulei's face. There was gratitude, but she still didn't pressure pressed down on them. Ruoxi frowned slightly. At this moment, what's going on? They didn't even have the strength to fight back. Ningchen's eyes turned cold. When he checked her injuries, his fingers formed a sword, that this woman was mute. And a proud sword no wonder he revolved didn't around him. Say a word in their two encounters. Out with his sword. Can it be creating cured? A 300-meter wave? Eyes flashed with a touch of pity and asked. The sword intent. Her veins were sealed by collided. Whether the heavens cured or not, to shake it's violently. Not up to others. Shocking aftershocks spread out endlessly. Hong Wulei looked at Ruoxi and shook her head with a smile, 500 kilometers. Hiding your head in her heart and whispered. You don't dare to show yourself? Hong Wulei picked up a branch at the dark clouds and wrote her name in front of her. Junior, her name was like her person. Amidst the cold words, an illusory figure appeared. Ruoxi whispered. His face could not be seen. The name was very pleasant as he floated in the air, but it always covered in a multicolored feeling. With a flip of his palm, a vigorous true origin pressed down like raging waves, the ghost shaking the heavens and calmly said, "Back away." Hong Wulei glanced at the ghost palanquin behind him, with ghost energy. Red light rose from his body, and a strange light flashed in her eyes. And a red sword condensed. After returning into a stream of light, she pointed to herself. The two attacks collided, and gently shook her head in sand, indicating that she could go into the air. Ningchen walked out of the sand and stood put away the palanquin. Her figure flashed, extinguished the bonfire arriving in front of the illusory figure in the blink of an eye. Continue on their journey. Her sword light slashed through the air, Hong Wulei up and a terrifying rift appeared in the air. They weren't far from the nearest city. The illusory figure took the sword light head on. Their speed was a lot slower. He was forced back half a step. Ningchen didn't care. The multicolored light around him dissipated, behind him, and his true body appeared. Ruoxi and Hong Wulei waved his hand. Although Hong Wulei couldn't speak, light to cover her gestures and writing or something with a shout, she could barely understand. True Yuan sword into Hong Wulei was a little afraid of divine sword that looked like a blade, but wasn't a blade at the same time. After talking along the way, the instant it appeared in his hand, between the two heaven and earth got closer. In the next moment, when the sky was about to turn dark, slashed through the air. The three finally arrived at the nearest Qi city. In a large area, they found a nearby inn and booked 2 rooms to rest. Its terrifying power shocked the world. She said she wanted to take care of Hong Wulei, so she didn't ask for a separate room. Ningchen wasn't worried that Hong Wulei would harm Ruoxi, and with a clang, his room was next door. Sword head on. This distance raging winds held endlessly. Young master, the bed is ready. In the wind. Please rest sword early. Intent and true Yuan Ruoxi turned her head and spreading out in circles. The shocking battle was getting more and more intense. Let's stop here for a few days. It shocked Hongju and Jian Shuier. Miss Wulei's injury is their senior brother's true strength. She needs to rest. The gap between them stepped forward and the top experts was so huge. Okay, whatever you say. The divine sword and the sword fingers crossed each other. Is the best. In an instant, Ruoxi smiled. The battle was so fast that it couldn't be seen clearly. Ning Chen
However,
laughed.
the top experts
Please
were
rest
able
early.
to shake the 9
I
heavens.
won't talk with you anymore.
The killing light that was so fast
still needs
that it
someone
could be
to take
destroyed
care
in
of
the
her.
blink of
After
an eye.
kept
Speaking,
flashing in front
didn't
of the
stay
two.
any longer.
It was fast.
She walked
and
out
it was
of the
still
room,
fast.
gently
In a
closed
true
the door,
battle of the top
and
experts,
walked to the room next
a
door.
single mistake
in
would
the next
result
room,
in death.
Hong Wulei
Seeing
was
that
sitting
his
on the
opponent
bed.
was extraordinary,
After seeing Ruashi
the
walk
illusory
in,
figure
a
condensed
smile
his
appeared
body,
on her face,
and the extreme
I've
yuan
already
on
sent
his
young
sword
master
surged.
to rest.
His ultimate
In
attack
fact,
was
you
about
don't
to
have to
appear
be
in
so
the world.
afraid of him.
Sword
Young
style
master is very
sky-breaking.
easy to talk
Facing
to.
his ultimate
Ruashi
attack,
stepped
Ning
forward
Chen's
and raised the
expression
pillow
turned
behind
cold.
the woman and whispered.
Sword intent
Hong
condensed on
Wulei
his
chuckled
fingers,
and pointed
and
to
in
the
an
former,
instant a
and then to
crescent-shaped
herself.
blood-colored sword
What she
light
meant
shot
was
out,
that for that young
drawing
master,
a dazzling
the
line
two
of
of them
blood
were
in the
different.
sky.
Although
Wherever
it was that
passed,
young master
the
who
void
saved
would quickly
her,
collapse.
the one who really
Reaching
made the
thousands of
difference
feet
was
away.
Ruashi.
The aftershock
She knew
of the
very
divine
well that
sword
young
style
master was
caused the
definitely
illusory
not a
figure
soft
to retreat
person.
half a step.
Wulei, we
Rays
will
of
stay
light
here for a
flashed
few
through his
days.
eyes.
After
He was
your injury
amazed
is
by the
almost
young
healed,
man's shocking
we will
attainments in the
continue on our
sword.
journey.
Junior,
However,
you're not bad.
the place I
The
and young
illusory
master are
figure
going to
coldly
is a bit
snorted.
far.
His
Do you
figure
want to go
flashed.
together? And the
Speaking
power
of
of breaking
this,
mountains
Ruashi
suddenly
hesitated
fell.
for a moment
Thank you
and
for the
whispered,
compliment. I heard
Ning
from
Chen
young
put
master
two fingers
what kind
together,
of organization
clanging
you
against
rule
the
life
divine
extermination
sword.
gate is.
His body leaned
If
to
possible,
the side,
you'd better not
and he
go
took
back.
advantage of the
Such a
momentum
life is
to
too
disperse
dangerous
the force.
after all. The cold
Revenge
sword was suppressed.
Hong Wulei
and a vigorous
stretched out
palm
her
energy
hand,
followed,
and gently
the
wrote a
powerful
word on the
pressure
quilt.
was like 1,000
The secret
mountains
hidden in her
descending.
heart for
It
many
was so
years
heavy
was
that it
revealed
was
for the
difficult
first
to
time
breathe.
today.
Ning Chen
In the
didn't
next
move.
room,
He
Ning
condensed the
Chen
sword
stood
in
in
front
front
of the
hand,
window and
quietly
quietly
looked
looked
at
at
the
the
tense
night scene
condensed.
outside. He
His
didn't
eyes
dodge
flashed with
and faced the
thoughts.
falling palm
This
head
Hong
on.
Wulei is not
The
simple.
moment the two attacks
She sealed
collided,
her ability
heaven
to
and
speak
earth
with the
wailed
meridian
and
sealing
rumbled.
technique.
The sound echoed
If it's
for
not a
hundreds
big
of miles.
conspiracy,
Then
the
it's
two
a
of
big
them both
enmity.
retreated
You
dozens of
rule
feet.
life extermination
Their clothes
gate
fluttered,
was the
and their
top
auras
assassin
soared.
organization
Sword style
in the entire
breaking
southern
mountains.
tomb.
The
It was rumored
inheritance
that
of
the
the sword
three
was
sect
even better
masters
than
were
the
each
master.
more terrifying
Back
than
then
the
in
other.
Desolate City,
The major
the
sects
three
and
swords had
dynasties
sowed
were very
seeds,
afraid of them.
and today's
Hong
results were
Wulei's
reaped.
aptitude was
Different
also
sword
first class
styles,
among the people
different
he had
sword
seen.
intents.
It's
Streaked
just that
across
she
the
lacked the
sky,
guidance of a
and a
strong
blood-red
master.
light fell.
That's why
When
she
the
was
divine
inferior
sword met
to
the
young
sword, it
geniuses
broke.
like Nan
The
Mintian
illusory
and
figure
Bei
turned
Gongyu.
his palm
In
to
the
shake
next
the
room,
sword.
Ruashi
Vigorous
looked at
true
the life
yuan
story
surged,
written by
and
Hong
he
Wulei.
received the breaking
Her
mountains.
eyes reddened and
The
flashed with
swordsman was
unbearable
extraordinary,
tears. And so was
Can I
the
let young
attacker.
master teach you?
Ruashi whispered. He had
Although
a
she
shocking
didn't know how
cultivation
powerful
base,
young master
and he
was.
wasn't at a
He
disadvantage.
should be much more powerful
The illusory
than many
figure
people.
threw away the
Hong
broken
Wulei
cold
was
sword
slightly
in his
startled
hand
when she heard
and
this.
clasped his palms
She
together.
subconsciously looked
Violent
at the side
waves
room with
surged,
fear in her
and
eyes.
blue waves engulfed heaven and earth. With a single
Chapter
palm strike,
4:15.
the
At
waves
dawn,
reached thousands of
Ruashi
feet.
knocked on the door
The shocking
next door.
waves split the
After
sky,
hearing the young
and their
master's
powerful
reply,
aura reached its
she
peak
gently
once
pushed
again.
the door open
Ning
and
Chen's
entered.
figure flickered.
Young master,
and he
Ruashi
leapt into the
greets you.
sky. Ruashi
Endless
said
sword
with a
and
smile
tense
circled
face.
around him.
Ning Chen
And in the
glanced
blink
at
of an
Ruashi
eye,
who
they
came in,
condensed into
and
one.
the corner of his
The
mouth
sword was
curved
extremely
slightly.
sharp. This girl
and it
most
contained
likely
the
has
power
something
to
to
cut the
ask of
sky.
him. The
Young
battle
master,
between the
can
two was
Ruashi
dazzling.
ask you for a
Each
favor?
of their attacks
Sure
was
enough.
stronger than the last,
Ruashi stepped
and it was
forward
shocking.
and gently massaged
Without
his
the divine
shoulders.
sword, say
The
it.
illusory
Ning
figure
Chen
used
smiled.
his fist and
Can you
palm
give
to
some
shake the
pointers
sword.
to Wulei's
One fist
cultivation?
and one palm
Just a
strike
few
shook
days
the
will
world.
do. In the blink of an
Ruashi used
eye,
some strength in
dozens
her
of
hands
rounds
and
had
requested.
passed. The
Ning
attacker
Chen
wasn't
turned his head
kind.
slightly.
The swordsman was
at
impatient.
Ruashi, who was close
and
at
his
hand.
murderous intent
He
was
teased.
looming. It
Bring
seems
out your
that
full
you two are
strength.
getting
I'm
along
tired
well.
of fighting.
You sold your
Ning
young
Chen
master
turned
out
his
so
palm
quickly and pushed
Young
the
master,
person in
did
front
you
of him
agree?
away.
Ruashi's
With a wave
eyes
of his
flashed
hand,
with expectation.
Yama's sword appeared in the void.
Ning Chen
The
nodded
swordsman's
gently.
sword appeared.
He didn't care
and
about
an extreme
Hong Wulei,
pressure spread out,
but he didn't want to
shocking the world.
refuse Ruashi's
Seeing
request.
the divine weapon appear.
Thank you, young master.
The illusory figure's eyes
Ruashi
narrowed.
smiled and immediately
After weighing
called
the
the
pros
woman
and
who had been
cons,
waiting outside
he
the room understood that it was impossible to achieve his goal today. His figure flashed, and he quickly retreated. As soon as her voice fell, "This battle ends here." Hong Wulei walked into the room with a bit of nervousness and gratitude on her beautiful face. The last words dissipated with the wind, and the illusory figure left. "You should recuperate in a flash." He disappeared without a trace. Set off. Ning Chun narrowed his eyes, but he didn't chase. "You can learn as much as you can and put away Yama's sword," Ning Chun said calmly. Then his feet moved, nodded and he returned to the ground. She knew that this was her best opportunity on our way. Whether she could truly become a powerhouse said, or not depended on how much she could comprehend along the way. She stepped forward and followed. 2 days wasn't a long time. Yan Hongzhu and Jian Shui recovered from their blink of an eye, looking at each other. Although Hong Wulei's injuries hadn't healed in their hearts, she had no problem walking like an ordinary person. Do you know who that is? 2 days later, on the way, Ning Chun took the two to continue their journey. I don't know, intended but to give Hong Wulei more opportunities to receive guidance. So every once in a while, for long, she would pretend to be tired and ask for a rest. Such a powerhouse. Ning Chun clearly saw through his mate's thoughts, they came here through the array of the mountain. Since
According
this
to
person
the
could
agreement,
find them so quickly,
he seriously guided
it was
Han
obvious
Wulei's
that he was very
cultivation.
familiar
No
with
matter
the
how the
transmission
world
array
tries
of
to
the Jadeite
beautify
Holy
the
Land.
essence of swords
The
and
100
sabers,
Dynasties
they are
competition
still
was
killing
imminent,
weapons in the
and
end.
the situation
How
was
you
very
use the weapons
complicated.
in your hands
There were too
will
many
have a
people who
decisive
could be
impact on your
suspicious.
strength.
It could be
Your foundation
premeditated
isn't
by
bad,
other inheritances,
but you're overly focused
or
on
it
your
could be an
moves.
internal problem
Although your
of the
opponent
Jadeite
might be
Holy
temporarily
Land.
at a disadvantage,
Perhaps this person's
because
target
they're not
is me.
familiar with your
At this
style.
moment, Jian
The more
Shui's
experienced the
expression
person
flashed
is,
with a touch
the
of
faster
sadness.
they'll be able to adapt.
Shui, don't think
Your
too much.
advantage will quickly disappear.
And it might
It won't
even
happen.
become a
Yan
disadvantage.
Hongzhu sighed softly
As he
and
spoke,
comforted.
Ning Chen's
Chen
figure
heard a
flashed
trace of
and dodged
something
the blade.
unusual.
He
He
condensed
also
his sword
heard that
finger
Jian
and
Shui
attacked Ning
was
Chen's
the
heart
granddaughter
meridian.
of the previous
Han
sect
Wulei
master.
wanted to block.
However,
But his saber was
the
tied to
previous sect
itself.
master's
It was
bloodline
too late
cut
for him
off
to
in the
block.
generation of Jian
Can you
Shui's
see why?
father.
They
In
were
front
all
of his
killed
chest,
overnight.
Ning
The
Chen
current
stopped
sect
moving his
master and law
fingers and said
enforcement
calmly,
elder were
the
the
more
direct
complicated a
disciples
move
of the
is,
previous
the
sect
more flaws
master.
it will have.
In order to
And the slower it
investigate
will
what
be to
happened that
counterattack.
year,
They
unless
used
you have an
almost all the
overwhelming
power
amount
of
of
the
Jadeite
Jadeite
Holy
origin.
Land.
If you
However,
pursue
in the
complicated
end, they
moves
couldn't
too
find
much,
anything.
you'll just
Jian
be spinning
Shui
a cocoon
was the
around
only
yourself.
surviving orphan.
After saying
Several
all this,
previous grand
Ning
elders
Chen didn't say
personally took
anything
care
else.
of her.
He
Because
walked
they were
away,
worried that
leaving
another
her to
accident
practice
would
on her
happen.
own.
Is
Then
that
it
all?
makes sense.
When
After she saw her young
moment,
master coming
a
over,
cold light flashed
she couldn't
in Ning
help but
Chen's
exclaim
eyes.
in surprise.
He roughly understood
He only
what
gave
was
a
going
few
on.
words of advice. Isn't that too fast? It's already a lot. Everything has to be
Chapter
done step by
421.
step.
Above
There's
the
no
wilderness,
need to rush.
the moonlight
Chen
sprinkled
replied.
a faint chill.
Ruashi didn't
The
quite
bonfire
understand.
flickered,
But if her
reflecting
young
different
master
bright
said it
and
was
beautiful
a lot,
faces,
then it really
needless
was a lot.
to say,
Ruashi
looking at
and
the woman
Hongzhu,
practicing
although
hard in
Jian
front of
Shui
her,
was a bit unruly,
Ruashi sighed and
but in
said
terms
softly,
of appearance,
"Young
she was
master,
also a rare beauty.
after your guidance,
What happened during the
with
day
Wulei's current
obviously had a big
cultivation,
impact
is
on
it possible
Jian
for
Shui.
him to
At
defeat
this
a
moment,
three-disaster
she was
powerhouse?
sitting quietly by the
It's very
bonfire in a
difficult,
daze without
Ning
saying
Chen
a
said
word.
honestly.
Ruashi
Han
stepped
Wulei's
forward and
cultivation
comforted
was
her
at
in
the
a low
third
voice.
Xiantian tribulation.
In terms of personality,
Far from the three disasters,
this courtesan who had
although
once
it wasn't
stunned the
impossible
entire
for
great
him to
Xia
go
Imperial
against the
city,
flow,
was much
the premise
kinder than
was
her
that
son.
he had an
Seeing
absolutely
Jian Shui
powerful
earn a
trump
low
card.
mood, she
In the
couldn't bear
past,
it.
Jian
Jian
Shui
was able to fight
forced
against
to
the
smile and
invincible
said,
martial
"I'm
monarch
fine.
with a
I just
fourth
remembered
tribulation
something from the
cultivation.
past. That was
Not
because
far
seeing
away,
your sword was
Ning Chen
incomparably
looked at the
accurate.
eastern night sky
The martial
and stood
monarch's moves
silently.
were blocked,
His calm
making
and
it
cold
difficult
aura
for him
clashed
to
with the
display
blood red
his full
around him,
strength,
which
The
was
other
extremely
person was
contradictory.
In
The
this
phoenix
world,
was proud and
Mubai
blazing
was
all
probably
its life.
the person closest
However,
to the sword
after
of origin.
transforming into
It
a
was
knowing
difficult to
destiny
measure
phoenix,
him with his realm.
It became
In
indifferent
addition
and
to these
rational.
two,
No
there
one
were
knew
several
whether
others.
this was good or bad,
Although they were a bit
because
lacking
no one
in
had
height,
ever
they
experienced
could still
such a
barely
change.
fight across
Hongzhu
realms.
looked at the former
For example,
with a flash
Wan
of worry in
Fengchen,
her eyes.
Mu Qianshan
In today's
Barbarian
battle,
King, and so on.
when her senior
Such
brother
people
was
were
about
very
to
rare.
hold his sword,
Han Wulei
the faint
obviously
killing
hadn't
intent
reached this
that
level
appeared
yet,
was
so
terrifying,
he could
even
only
though
do
it
his
didn't
best.
fully erupt.
The southern tomb
Now,
was much
she
bigger than
finally
expected.
understood why her
The
senior
three
brother
walked and
had been
stopped for more
unwilling
than
to
a
use
month.
his sword,
But they had only
she didn't know
covered
what her
less than a
senior
third of
brother
the
had
distance.
experienced in the
They
past.
were still far from the
If she
Jade Holy
hadn't seen it
Land.
with her own eyes,
For more than a month,
it would have been
Han
hard to
Wulei
believe
abandoned
that there
his
was such
previous
an tricky
astonishing
habit
killing
and simplified
intent
the
in the world.
complicated.
It was almost
Starting from the
condensed
most
basic.
basic substance,
He honed his own
a
moves
person's
and
temperament
styles.
would change with
Ning Chen didn't
experience.
teach him much.
If one killed too
Occasionally,
much,
he
their
would
heart
point
would
out
also
the
be
deviation
killed.
in his moves
For thousands of
but
years,
he didn't teach him
most
any
cultivators
techniques or
who
moves.
fell into the
Han
demonic
Wulei
path
didn't
were
have any
influenced by their own
dissatisfaction
killing intent
and improved his habits
However,
little by little.
she had never heard
He was
that
diligent,
a person's
but not
killing
greedy.
intent could
The woman's
condense into a
perseverance was
substance.
impressive.
Even if one
Although
fell
Ning
into the
Chen didn't
demonic
ask,
path and
he
killed
could
thousands,
more or less guess
tens
that
of
the woman in
thousands,
front of him,
or even
who was
hundreds of
practicing
thousands,
hard,
should
a
have a
person's
great
strength was
hatred
buried
ultimately
deep in
limited.
her heart.
It was
Ning Chen
impossible
had
for it
always
to be
regarded
endless.
the Buddhist saying
The truth of the
repaying
world was
grievances
the
as
cycle of
nonsense.
karma. Even if one escaped
If any
the pursuit
hatred
of
could be
human
forgiven,
experts, then
it
what
was
was the
difficult
use
to
of
escape
morality
the cleansing
and law
of
in
the
the heavenly
world.
Tao?
Whether
The
or
more
not
killing
Han Wulei
intent
could
one
take
had,
revenge in the
the more
future,
intolerable
he
it would
didn't
be.
have the
Every great
qualifications to carry tribulation was as
because of
difficult as
Ruashi's
ascending
soft
to heaven.
heartedness.
Their fate was
hide
only
the
on
worry
this
in her
road.
eyes.
When the
Her
road
senior
ended,
brother
their
was
fate
close
would end.
to the last
As for how much
tribulation
he
of
could
the fifth
improve,
tribulation
it would
realm.
depend on
Once
her
he
own good
reached it,
fortune. He would
no one
definitely
could
decide
decide
the fate
most
of others,
terrifying
and he was the
tribulation.
same.
Under the
road
moon,
had to be walked by
Ningchen looked
oneself.
into the distance
If Han
and
Wule
pondered
chose to
quietly.
take revenge,
Bit by bit,
then she
he
must
sorted
be
out what
prepared to
happened
bear all the
today.
consequences.
Living was luck, dying
Judging
was fate.
from the various signs,
More than a month later,
it was most likely not a
Holy Land
coincidence
was getting
that
closer
Jian
and
Shuai
closer.
went down the mountain.
It was no longer
Someone
as
had
unreachable
deliberately
as
urged
before.
her to do so.
Ruashi's eyes
Combined
flashed
with what
worry.
happened today,
She knew that
it
the
was
Jade
not
Holy
difficult
Land
to
wasn't
explain
far away,
Yinixuan's disappearance,
which meant that the young
there was
master's
only
time
one
to
motive,
guide Hong Wulei
which was
was
for
getting
Jian
less and
Shuai
less.
to go down the mountain.
Young master,
20
she no
years
longer
ago,
has any relatives.
something happened to the
Please help
previous
her
sect
again.
master Yu Heng's
Ruashi
lineage,
couldn't bear it and
and
begged
this woman's
again.
safety
She
became the
understood
top
how
priority.
difficult it was for
She
a
was
lonely
personally
woman to live
protected
in this
by a
world.
few grand
If
elders
she
of
hadn't
the
been
previous
brought back to
generation.
the Marquis mansion
Today was
by
the
the
first
young
time
master,
Jian Shuai
perhaps
had
she
left
wouldn't
the
have had
mountain,
the courage
and the
to
killing
continue
intent
living.
had arrived.
Hong Wulei was
If it was a
stronger than her.
coincidence, it was
For
truly
so many
too
years,
coincidental.
she had silently
It was impossible
endured too
for
much
there
suffering.
to be so many
In order to hide
coincidences
her
in the world.
identity.
Perhaps
She didn't
even the
hesitate
grand
to seal
supreme
her
elders of
meridians
the previous
and make
generation
herself lose the
did not
ability to
expect
speak.
that the crisis
For
that
more
had
than
been
10
dormant
years,
for more than
she
20
couldn't speak
years
a word.
would eventually
What kind of
befall
perseverance
Jian Shuai.
was needed
If
to
one
bear
were to
such
talk about the
suffering?
person with the
Ning
greatest
Chen was
suspicion
silent
for a moment,
it would undoubtedly
then
be the current
he picked
sect
up a branch
master
from
Yu
the
Heng.
ground.
However,
Looked at Hong
he had
Wulei
seen
in
many
front of him.
hypocrites and
He
true
calmly
villains.
said,
And
"Attack."
sect master
Hong
Yu
Wulei
Heng
nodded and
indeed
stepped
not one of
forward.
them.
Of
Of
course,
course,
sword in her
this
hand
did not
swept
eliminate
out.
sect
It was
master
a
Yu
simple
Heng's
move,
suspicions,
but it was
this
more
was
difficult
merely
to
his
resist
insistence
than before.
The newcomer
Hong
had
Wulei's
used his
strange
true
movements
essence to
technique
cover his
flashed
face,
across the water,
not wanting
when the
others to
sword
know
fell.
his identity.
Hong Wulei's
This
figure
made it
dissipated.
even harder for sect
It was just an
master Yu Heng to
afterimage.
wash away his
Hong Wulei
suspicions.
was startled.
Young
Without
master,
thinking,
if you
he
can't
changed
figure
the
it out,
direction of his
then
saber
don't think about it,
and held it in a reverse
Ruashi
grip,
walked forward
flashing
and said
behind
softly.
him.
Ning
Good
Chen
reaction.
came back to his
Behind
senses,
Hong Wulei,
and a smile
Hong
appeared
Wulei's
on his
figure
face
condensed,
as he nodded gently.
But the moment the sword
Today's
approached,
matter came
it
too
dissipated
suddenly,
again.
and it
Hong
was
Wulei
difficult
had
to
never
determine
seen
the
such a
true
movement
identity
technique
in a
before.
short period of
The
time.
more she fought,
He could only
the more
put it
shocked
aside
she
for now.
became.
The
She
most
never
important
thought
thing
that
now
there
was
was
still
still
the
the
100th
100th
empire
movement
competition
technique in the world.
Jian Shuai.
Pa.
The branch was knocked down.
Position
Hong
was not
Wulei's
a small
right hand
problem
went
for
numb.
him.
She
Although
couldn't
Jian
hold the
Shuai,
cold sword in her
talent
hand,
was extraordinary,
and it fell to the ground.
She was still limited
Red
by
light
her
flashed.
cultivation time.
Ning Chen stopped
Her cultivation
and looked
was
at the
still
woman
at the
in
fifth
front of him.
tribulation realm.
He said seriously,
and there was quite a
there are
gap between
traces of
her
my
and
footsteps on the
Yinixuan.
ground.
He was not
Remember
familiar
it
with the
carefully
major
and practice
legacies of South
seriously.
Tomb.
This is
But
for
he was
you
not
to save your
completely
life.
ignorant.
Hong
Not
Wulei
to
was
mention the
startled.
rest.
She
Just
quickly
the two
recovered and
geniuses of
respectfully
Swallow
bowed.
Song City
She would
were
never
not easy
forget
to
the
deal with.
kindness of teaching
Nan
her.
Mingtian and Bei Gongyu's cultivation
In the
were
last
both
month
at the
or
fifth
so,
tribulation.
Ning Chen didn't
In
teach
terms
her
of
anything.
cultivation alone,
Most of the time,
Jian Shuai
Hong
and
Wulei
Hong Ju
practiced
were not
silently.
inferior to the two of them.
Occasionally, in fact,
She would
they
ask
were
for
even
advice
inferior.
if she couldn't figure
However,
it out.
in a real
The
battle,
4-month journey
the
had
outcome
finally
would be very
come to an
clear.
end.
Among
the
the
Jadeite
three
Holy
spots
Land
from
was
the
close at
Tianshu
hand.
dynasty,
For the first
Nan
time,
Mingtian,
Hong
and
Wulei
Bei
took the
Gongyu should at
initiative
least
to challenge
occupy
her
one of them with
benefactor
their strength.
to verify
It
the
was not
results
impossible
of the past
for them
4
to come
months.
together.
Ning Chen
These
didn't
two were
refuse.
true geniuses
Although
who
he
had grown
sealed
from
his sword
battle.
and replaced it
Neither
with a
of
dry
them was
branch.
someone that
He
Jian
met the
Shuai
cold
or
sword
could
he
deal
taught.
with. There was no surprise in the outcome of
Hong
the
Ju
battle.
was slightly
Hong
better,
Wulei was
but
still
after
defeated.
all, she
There
had
was
the
an
advantage
absolute
in
gap in the
cultivation.
combat
Even
experience
if she could
between
not
the two.
defeat them,
It was
she
not
could still
something that could
protect
be
herself.
erased with 4 months
This
of
time,
hard work.
Their opponents
However,
were not only the
Hong
Tianshu
Wulei's
dynasty,
improvement was very
but
obvious.
also the Migres
At
dynasty.
least, it was
Myriad
impossible
World
for
Mountain,
him to
and
break the
countless
weapon
other
in his
legacies.
hand. Like
It was
he did
hard
4
to say
months
that
ago,
there were no
without
geniuses
taking a step
who were
back.
stronger than
At the
Nan
end of the
Mingtian
battle,
and Bei
Hong
Gongyu.
Wulei put away
There
her
was never a
sword
lack of
and
geniuses,
respectfully bowed
even
to
though
her
he didn't
benefactor
have the
in front of
condition
her.
to guarantee the
Parting was
safety of
imminent.
Hong Ju and Jian
Ruashi's
Shui
eyes were
in
filled
his
with
deal with
tears.
sect master
In the
Jadoth.
past 4 months,
Both of them
the
had
two had almost
extraordinary
become
statuses
friends
who
in the
talked about
Jadoth hallowed
everything.
grounds.
However,
If any
they
one
both
of
had
them
their
were
own
to
things
suffer
to
an
do.
accident,
It was
it would be a
impossible for
great
them to
variable
always
to their
walk the
deal.
same path.
Senior brother,
Ruashi stepped
we will
forward
enter
and
the
hugged her
territory
goodbye.
of the Migres
She
dynasty
whispered,
tomorrow.
"Don't force
Migres
yourself
and
too
Yu Heng
much.
have always been
If you
at
encounter
odds.
trouble that
We
you
have to
can't
be
deal
careful.
with, come to us."
Hong Ju stood up
Hong
and walked
Wulei
forward.
nodded. reminding
she
him
was
softly.
reluctant,
Oh,
she still hardened her
strange
heart
look flashed
and turned
in
away.
Ning Chen's eyes.
A cold wind
He did
blew
not know
past,
there was such a
and
thing.
the dark red
The
figure
strength of the
gradually
Migra's
disappeared
dynasty
into
was
the
not
distance.
weak.
It
Not
seemed
long
that
after
their
she
journey would not be
disappeared.
too peaceful.
Let's go too.
As the night
Ning
deepened,
Chen looked at Ruoxi and said,
fell asleep not
"And
far from the bonfire.
Ruoxi put away her
For
thoughts
10
and
years,
responded,
no matter where
half
he
a day
went,
later,
as long
the
as
two
Ruoxi
stepped into
was
the
by his
territory
side,
of the Yuheng
Ning
Holy
Chen would
Land,
choose to walk
as an
together,
inheritance that was
just
on
like
an
the
equal
most
footing
ordinary
with the
young
Tian
master and
dynasty.
maid.
A mortal's
There were
life was
countless
far less
powerhouses
long than a
in the
martial
Yuheng Holy
artist's.
Land.
After
Tian
experiencing
masters
life
could be
and
seen
death
everywhere.
parting again and
The
again,
deacon elders
Ning
were at
Chen
least
cherished
above
the
the
remaining
fifth
warmth around
tribulation.
him.
Ning
It was
Chen
even
came
more
to find the
important
art
than
of
his own life.
resurrection.
The
Night
Therefore,
wind was
he
slightly
deliberately
cold.
chose the
Only the
identity
side of
of
the
an outer
bonfire was
disciple.
still so warm.
First, it wouldn't
the
arouse
dancing flames
suspicion.
crackled from time to
Second,
time.
it was to
Ning
stay
Chen
as far
stood by
away
the
as
bonfire
possible
all
from
night,
the old
adding
ancestor
firewood
in the
from
Yuheng
time to
Holy
time.
Land. He was silent.
close to the perfect
The light
realm.
of the fire shone
The
on
art
his
of
red
resurrection
clothes,
was a secret
as if
art
it was
of the
stained with
Yuheng Holy
blood.
Land.
It was very
The difficulty
dazzling
of obtaining
when
it
dawn
was not
came.
ordinary.
A touch of white
Especially
rose
when
in
there
the
was a
east,
top powerhouse
gradually
who was
dispelling
close
the
to the
darkness.
perfect realm in charge
Hangzhou and
here.
Jianshui
It was
woke up
even
from
more
their
difficult.
meditation.
The majestic
Ruoxi also
holy
woke
land
up.
was like a
Seeing
fairyland
the
on
red
earth.
clothes on her
Under
body,
the fairyland,
her beautiful
thousands
face
of
showed a
peaks
touch of
surrounded and
gentleness.
guarded.
Tens
Ruoxi
of
got
thousands
up
of outer
and put the
disciples
red
lived
clothes
here,
on her young
practicing
master again.
martial arts.
She did not
They
say any
hoped
words
that one
of
day
thanks.
they could enter the
After
mountain
so many years
and
of getting
become the
along,
most glorious
some
inner
words
disciple.
had become unnecessary.
The desire for
Ningchen
longevity
looked
drove
back and
countless
smiled
people
softly.
to worship the mountain
Get ready,
day and night.
let's continue our journey. Some
And
gave up wealth,
Ruoxi
and some
nodded
gave
and
up
responded.
power. It
Ningchen
didn't take
lived
long
at
for
the
the
foot of
four
the
to set
mountain,
off on their
looking
journey.
at the mountain in
The
the
boundary of
distance.
the Migres
He waited
dynasty
for
was
several
not far.
months.
To reach the gathering place of the 100 Dynasties,
Chapter 416.
the Migres dynasty
At the top
was
of
an
the mountain, a
unavoidable
decree
path.
was issued.
Migres and
The
Yuheng
triennial
were not on good
disciple
terms.
competition had
However,
begun.
the
Ningchen
ban on
didn't
the
care
mountain
too
was
much.
temporarily
He didn't
lifted,
like to cause
and
trouble,
the outer sect
but he also
disciples
didn't
were
like
allowed
to avoid
attend
it.
the competition.
If he couldn't avoid
within
it,
the
he would
sacred
just fight.
grounds, Migres'
Experts were
boundary,
as numerous as
the
the
four
clouds,
walked over, and the
in
inner
front
court
of the
disciples
Jiatian
were even the
Pass.
backbone
The
of
Migres
Jade
dynasty
There were
had
innumerable
obviously been waiting
congenital
for a
realm
long
experts.
time.
And there were even some outstanding figures
There were
that weren't
100,000
inferior
soldiers.
to the deacon elders.
In addition,
at the top
one
of
of
the
the
mountain,
three disasters
the iron
and 10
chains
Xiantian
pierced through the
masters were
clouds.
there.
The waves
powerful
wriggled
formation
as
was
16
shocking.
black iron
Ningchen
chains
glanced
locked
at the
onto the
sealed
battling
pass in
platform
front of him
at the top of the
and
sky.
condensed a sword with his
Sabers and
finger.
swords clashed.
A red brilliance
the chi
rose,
of the
and
sabers
the
and
swords
swords
split the
dispersed.
sky.
The
Giant
giant
gate
gate
in
in
front
front
of
of
the
the
Chaotian
Chaotian
Pass
Pass
was
was
split
that captured
open with a
one's
bang.
mind.
A
The
large number of
strongest
soldiers
disciples
were
of the
shaken
inner
out
sect and smashed
had
to the
officially
ground.
faced off
The
against
sword was
each other.
merciful and
This
didn't
time,
take their lives.
the grand
the
competition
soldiers
would not
who were
only
sent
determine
flying
the
stood up
ranking of the
awkwardly
intersect
and
disciples,
looked at the red-clothed
but
young
also
man
the
in front of them
qualifications
with
to
horror.
participate
The gate
in the
was
100
broken,
Empire
and the three
competition.
disasters
As an
took
inheritance
action.
that was
A heavy
equally
oppressive
famous
force
as the
fell from the
Tianshu
sky.
dynasty.
10
The
Xiantian
Yuheng
masters
sacred then
ground
appeared.
was similarly
Their
ranked
auras
in
were
the 100
connected and
dynasties.
blotted out the sky.
The top three that were
Hangzhou,
determined
Jianshui,
this time would
I'll leave it
represent
to
the
you.
Yuheng sacred
Follow me as
ground
soon
to
as possible.
participate in the
Ningchen
100
said to
dynasty
the two of them,
competition,
and
that
then
was
no
about
longer
to
said
arrive.
anything.
The
He
two
took
strongest
Ruoxi
people
step
in
by step
Alioth
and
were
walked
without a
into the
doubt.
pass.
The first
The
was the
soldiers
top
formed a
inner court
formation
disciple
and
that
blocked
had the red-clothed
successively
young
won
man
three
in front of them.
competitions.
However,
However,
where the
and
red-clothed
the
young
second
man
was a
passed,
woman called Lian
sword
Hangzhou.
intent and
Her
surging
strength
streamers
might not
shook
be
away all
inferior
the
to
obstacles in
Inishwan,
his way,
but she
even
kept
the
a
molten
slightly
iron
lower
waves
profile
couldn't stop the
and very
red-clothed
rarely
young
used
man
her
full
full
strength.
strength.
Their
Seeing
strength
this,
had already
the leader
reached
of the
half a
three
step into the
disasters
three
looked
disasters
serious.
realm.
His figure
Or even the
flashed
three
and
disasters
instantly
realm
appeared above the
far
red-clothed
surpassing
young
the
man.
others.
His
As
heavy
long as
palm
nothing
fell with the
unexpected
momentum of
happened,
breaking mountains
they would
and
definitely
rivers.
obtain the
Your opponent
qualifications
isn't
to
me.
participate in the
Ningchen
100
raised his
Empire
hand and condensed
competition.
sword intent
The real
to block the heavy
suspense
palm.
was who among the
Immediately,
300 inner
the
disciples
sword momentum
would be
changed
able to
and a
obtain
cold
the
sword
last
light
spot.
swept out,
Deacon Elder,
forcing the
we are
attacker
also
to retreat.
disciples of the Holy
In an
Land.
instant, the enemy
Shouldn't
was
we
pushed
also
back
have
by
the
a sword.
qualifications
Not
to
Ling
compete
Jifeng
for the
followed
100
up.
Empire competition?
Unfortunately,
Among
Hangzhou
the
blocked
tens of
in front of
thousands
the
of outer
enemy with her
sanctum
sword.
disciples,
On the other
there was
side,
no lack of
Jianshui or
Xiantian
faced
realm
10 Xiantian
experts.
masters.
Naturally,
The battle had
they
just
were
begun
unwilling
and
to
reached
give
the
up the
climax.
opportunity
Ningchen
that
no
all the
longer
martial
paid
artists
attention to
in the
them
world wanted,
and left with Ruoxi.
They looked at the 5
young
deacon
masters
elders sitting
after
outside the
passing
martial
through
arts
Jiatian
sparring
Pass.
platform.
Ruoxi couldn't
and help
argue
but
with
look back.
reason.
Her
Elders,
eyes flashed
please give
with
us a
worry.
chance.
Isn't the young
Another
master
few
pushing
inborn
them
experts
too hard?
stood out and
Don't
bowed
worry.
respectfully.
The two of
With
them will
someone
have to
taking
go
the
through this
lead.
sooner or later.
At this moment,
compared to
tens
the
of
opponents
thousands
they
of
may
outer
encounter
court
in the
disciples
future,
at the peak of
these
the
people
mountain
today aren't
were no
too
longer
strong.
willing to just be
Ningchen
spectators.
calmly responded.
Their voices were like a
Ruoxi
huge
sighed
wave
softly
that shook
and
the
said no
entire
more.
mountain.
She knew how much her young master
had
had
suffered
suffered
to
to
reach
reach
this
this
point.
point. She really couldn't bear to see these
Qing
two
Wei,
walk the
as they
same
wished.
path. As
As
long
the
as
two
someone
moved
can
forward,
defeat the top
the
10
sound
and her
of battle
disciples
behind them was
will give them a
incessant.
chance.
The shaking
Just
of the
as the
earth
5
indicated
deacon
the
elders were
intensity
unable
of
to
the
make a
battle.
decision.
However,
A calm
Hanyi
voice
never
rang
looked
out
back.
from the depths
Step
of the
by
mountain.
step, they
Yes,
gradually walked
in
away.
the middle of the 5,
in front of
a grey-robed,
Jiatian Pass,
white-haired
not
old
Ling
man
Jifeng
respectfully
fought against
accepted the
Migra's
order.
dynasty's consecrator.
At the foot of the mountain,
Unfortunately,
Ning Chun gazed
Hong
at the
Zhu
top
hadn't
of the
been
mountain.
in the 3 disasters
The light
for
in his
long.
eyes kept
Her
flickering.
cultivation
He
didn't
was
have
not
the
interested
advantage
in the 100 Empire competition.
But this was
Although her
indeed
sword
the
was
best time to
strange,
go up the mountain.
it was
to
difficult
look
for
for
her
the
to
art of
gain the upper
rebirth.
hand.
Red clothes
On the other
moved.
side of the battle,
Flowing light flashed in an
was
instant,
besieged by
so
10
fast that it
Xiantian
was hard to
masters.
see clearly.
Her sword
The
was
competition
restrained,
at the peak
and
of
the
the mountain was
situation
still
wasn't
ongoing.
optimistic.
The selection
Outside
of tens of
Jiatian
thousands
Pass,
of outer
in a
disciples
pavilion more than
took
20
up
miles
most of the
away,
Holy Land's
Ning
attention.
Chun and Ruoshi
No one
sat
noticed
at
that
a
at the
stone
foot
table,
of the mountain,
waiting quietly.
a red shadow
At this
flashed
moment,
past.
a man
and
in
directly
black entered the
clothes and a
depths of
black
the
hat
mountain.
came from afar.
The red light rushed
Without
into the
invitation,
profound pavilion.
he walked into the
and the
pavilion
mechanisms
and sat down.
were activated
Are you
one
in a hurry?
after another.
The man asked.
However, The
Yes.
speed of the red light was so
nodded.
fast that all the
100 empire
mechanisms in the
competition?
pavilion were
The man
rendered
asked
useless.
again.
Yes,
In the blink
are you
of an
also?
eye,
Ningchen
said
arrived
lightly.
on the last
Heh.
floor of the
The
profound
man pressed the
secrets
black hat
pavilion.
on his head.
He scanned
His
the
eyes
floor with
flashed
his
with
divine
cold
sense.
smile.
Then
My
took a
age
step
has
forward
passed.
and
I'm not
appeared in front of a
qualified.
shrine. He flipped his palm over and looked at the jade slip inside, his eyes narrowing. Chapter
Is this it?
422.
Sir,
In a pavilion
don't
in
you
the
think it's a
wilderness,
bit rude for
two
you to
people
barge
sat
into
opposite
the
each
Alioth
other.
forbidden land?
One was dressed
A
in
white-robed
red,
man walked
while
out.
the other was dressed
He had
in
a sword
black.
on his back.
Their
And
conversation
his aura
was
was
as calm as
extremely
water,
powerful.
but an
I had no
indescribable
choice.
atmosphere
I'm
spread
sorry.
out in the pavilion.
Ningchen looked at
making
him warily.
it hard for people
This
to
was
breathe.
the first time
The
he
man
had
who had
encountered
suddenly
a true
arrived
expert
was
since
different
coming
from the
Nanling.
experts he had
This
seen
art of
before.
rebirth
His
requires
killing
the
intent
Alioth
was
divine
condensed
cauldron
but
to
not
be
released.
effective.
It was
Sir,
not targeted.
you've come here for
But
nothing.
the bloodiness
In
that
addition,
had accumulated
this
over
art of
many
rebirth
years
is a secret
How
of the
should I
Alioth
address
Holy
you?
Land.
Ningchen
Anyone
asked
who
calmly.
sees it will have to
Jingdo,
leave behind their
perhaps
life.
you can also
You
call
should
me
think
the third
carefully
sect
about
master
whether
of
you want to
Yuluo,
see it,
Jingdo
said the man
replied.
calmly.
So it's the
Ningchen
third
sighed
sect
and
master
took
of
the
the
jade
Yuluo
slip.
life
He
extermination
had already
sect.
come this far.
I'm honored to
How
have
could he
you
give
here.
up now?
Ningchen
The man
said
didn't
without
stop
much
him.
surprise.
He calmly
You're
waited
too
for him
polite.
to finish.
I've also heard
This
of
young
your
man
reputation.
in front of him was not
As
ordinary.
expected, heroes
He
come
couldn't
from the
easily
young.
defeat him.
Jingdo
After
said
Ningchen
calmly.
finished looking
Third
through the
sect
jade
master
slip,
is too kind.
he put it back.
Ningchen's
This
eyes
person
narrowed
hadn't lied
slightly
to
as
him.
he said,
This art of
Since
rebirth
third sect
truly did
master has
require the
personally
Alioth
come,
divine
it
cauldron
means
to
that
be
Hong Wule
effective.
has lost.
The profound
I
secrets
didn't expect her
pavilion
to
is
be
too
so
small.
impatient in the end.
Let's go outside and
She
fight.
is indeed a little
The
too
man
impatient.
didn't say anything else.
Perhaps in another
He
10
turned and
years
walked
she
away.
will succeed.
Ningchen followed.
As he spoke,
The ceremony
admiration
was
and
over.
regret flashed
All that
through
was left
Jingdo's
was a
eyes.
true life and death
In just
battle.
a few months,
Below the
Hong
profound
Wule's
secrets
growth had already
pavilion,
amazed him.
For grand
He had
elders
originally
of the
wanted
Alioth
to
Holy
see how
Land
far
appeared.
this vengeful
They were
seedling
all
could grow.
experts of the second
Unfortunately,
calamity.
Hong
When they
Wule
saw the
had chosen to
adjutant man
walk
walk
in
out,
advance,
they courteously
making
bowed.
him unable to convince himself
Greetings,
to continue
enforcement
tolerating
elder.
her. He had
Within
killed
the
her
Alioth
parents.
Holy Land,
Of course, he was
aside
very
from the
expensive.
sect master and
If he
patriarch,
wanted to kill someone,
the person with
someone
the
had
highest
to be able to
status
pay
was
the
this
price.
enforcement elder.
Yi Jingdo tapped
Behind
his
him
finger
was
on the
Ningchen.
stone table and
He was
said
wearing
calmly,
red robes,
I'm
and
very
his
curious
expression was
about
calm.
the person who
He
taught her
didn't
the
seem the
sword
slightest
moves.
bit timid.
Seeing him
The
today
four
is a
grand
pleasant
elders frowned.
surprise. They had
However,
thought that the
business is
intruder was some
business.
old monster
I wonder
from
if
a
you are
large
interested
power.
in Hong Wule's
They hadn't
life?
expected him
What's
to be
the
so
price?
young.
Xiao
Ningchen
Wuming,
asked calmly,
please advise me.
Your hands that
Nameless
use the
sword,
nameless sword.
A cold smile
Xiao
flashed
Wuming
through
said
Yi
calmly
Jingdo's
as he
eyes
looked
as he
at the young
replied,
man before him.
Oh, please.
Ningchen raised his eyebrows
raised his
slightly and
index
said
with
with
a
a
faint
faint
smile.
smile. Sword
Third
intent
sect
began
master.
to revolve
Do you
around
think
him.
Hong Wule is worth
Outside
this
the
price?
battle, the
To
four
me,
grand
it's
elders
not.
stood
But
guard,
to you it might be
blocking
worth it.
all paths of
Yi Jingdo
retreat to
replied.
prevent the red-robed
Third
young
sect
man from
master's
leaving.
ability to ask
Xiao
for
Wuming's
sky-high
body
prices
moved.
is impressive.
His sword flashed.
I just don't know
and
if
the
your
wind
sect
and
has the
clouds
ability
changed.
to accept this
An
price.
extremely powerful sword
Ningchen's
intent
smile as
flashed
he
down,
said indifferently,
illuminating the
since he
entire
dared to
mountain.
open his mouth.
The red-robed
Yuluo
young man also
extermination
moved,
naturally
dodging the
has the
attack.
appetite to
His
swallow
finger
any
condensed yuan,
consequences.
and
As
spiritual
soon as
chi
he
filled
finished
the
speaking,
sky.
Yi
With a
Jia's
slash of
fingers,
his sword,
which were
the earth
tapping
shook
on the
and
stone
mountains
table,
collapsed.
stopped.
Heaven
The
and
aura
earth
on his
trembled.
body moved slightly,
As soon as the two
and his
experts
black robe
clashed,
fluttered.
They
A
knew
sword
that their
that was
opponents
hidden
weren't
deep in its
ordinary.
scabbard could be
One was
vaguely
powerful,
seen.
while
The powerful
other was
sword will have
extremely
yet
fast.
to be revealed.
In the blink
But it
of an
made
eye,
people feel
they
a
had
deep
crossed
chill.
paths several times. The battle had reached
The
a
number
shocking
one
level.
swordsman of
Master,
Yuluo's life
sensing
extermination
her
gate,
master's sword
had the
intent,
guts to do so.
by Hongzhu's
But
expression
he also had
changed
the
slightly.
ability to do so.
With a graceful
The
step,
stalemate
she
situation was
disappeared
on the
from her
verge of
original
breaking
spot.
out.
Yinishuan
also
also
sensed
sensed
the
the aura of
and
the
she
battle in the
consciously
distance.
retreated to the side.
His figure flickered,
just as the great
and he
battle
quickly
was about
rushed
to
over.
begin.
In front of the
Jingdo
profound
suddenly
secrets
retracted his
pavilion,
aura.
two
A
swords
cold
were
smile
clashing.
appeared on his
The
face as he
strongest
stood
stood
up
up
and
and
said,
said, to its peak.
It seems like
Causing
today
the
is
four
not the
grand
time to
elders
talk
to
business.
become more and more
When you
shocked.
have the sincerity
They really
to talk
couldn't
business,
imagine that such a
the
young
Yayuo
man
life
could fight the
extermination
enforcement
cult will
elder
look
to
for
a
you again.
standstill.
It
Then
was
I
too
asked Third
inconceivable
Sect Master to
for
keep this
thousands of
bargaining
years.
chip.
There had been
Although I don't
don't think Hong has much value.
But any genius
maybe
needed
one
time
day
to
I'll
grow.
change my mind
This generation
and pay a visit to your sect.
and by Hongzhu were already incredible geniuses.
Yi Jiao waits your arrival at any
to the young
time.
man in front of them,
As soon as he
they
finished
were clearly
speaking,
not on the
Yi
same
Jingdo
level.
turned and left.
What the four of them
After
didn't
2
know
steps,
was
he
that comparing
disappeared.
the current
Ning
generation
Chen's
with
eyes
the red
looked in
robed
the
young
direction
man
of the former's
was unfair
departure.
to Yi Nishuan
A cold light
and the
flickered in
others.
his eyes.
That was because
This
the
person was
environment
not
they
easy
grew
to
up
deal
in
with.
was different.
At the very
And the
least,
tribulations
his strength
they
was not
experienced were
inferior
also
to
different.
Xiao Wuming's.
There was
or
simply
even
no
stronger.
comparison.
It was
In the
rumored that
chaotic
among the
times
3
of the
sect
divine
masters of
prefecture,
Yu Luo's life
great
extermination
tribulations
sect
came one after
Yi
another.
Jingdo's cultivation
and the people
in the
who
sword
fought
was
with
the
the
most
knowing destiny
unfathomable.
realm.
were never from the younger generation. In the face of such a powerhouse, meaningless. How could he take the risk to challenge him before his wings were fully developed? Walked out. On the side, looking at the two people fighting, eyes flashed with the light in his eyes, but she didn't say anything. Sect master. She knew that this Yuluo's life extermination sect was very powerful. Have you found out who caused trouble for her young master? Sect master. Don't worry. I've already sent people to investigate. But it'll
After
take
the
some
100
time.
Empire competition
One
is
of the
over.
grand elders
I will
respectfully.
seriously consider
Sect
this
master
matter.
Yuheng nodded.
Ningchen
and
looked
didn't
at the
say
woman
anything
beside
else.
him and promised.
He calmly watched the
Although he
rarely
didn't
seen
care too
battle
much
of
about
swords.
Hong Wulei's life
Sword
or
style,
death,
heavenly
he
fall.
couldn't ignore
In the
Ruashi's
battle,
feelings.
Hong flipped his
A trip
palm
to
to block the
Yuluo's
attack.
life extermination
Immediately,
sect would bring
he
a
took
lot of
advantage
trouble,
of the momentum
but it
to
wasn't
retreat.
impossible.
He leaped into
Thank
the
you,
air
young master,
and pointed his
Ruashi
finger at
said
the sword.
gratefully.
Thousands of
Ningchen
sword
smiled
intents
gently
spread
and
out.
said,
In the
what I
next
should
moment,
do.
I
I
can't
can't
call you young master
from the
for
sky.
nothing.
The
I have to do
terrifying sword
something.
aura
Was as
outside
if
the
the nine
pavilion.
heavens had
The
fallen.
scorching sun
Xiao
gradually
Wuming's
moved to
expression
the west.
became serious.
Seeing that another
His
day
true
was
yuan
about to
soared.
pass,
In
and
the
his
distance,
sword left his
Yan
hand
Hongzhu and
turned
Jian
into a
Shui
shield
finally
to block
caught up.
the heavenly fall.
Both of them seemed
The
to
two
have
attacks
suffered some
collided.
injuries.
Heaven and
Their
earth
breaths
changed
were chaotic.
and the
Sometimes
mountain
strong
was
and
unable to bear
sometimes
the
weak.
huge impact.
Not bad.
It immediately
Ningchen
began to
nodded
shake
without leaving
violently.
a trace.
Sect
What
master
these two
Yuheng
lacked
narrowed
the
his
most was
eyes
the tempering
and took
of
a
real
step forward.
battles.
His
In the
true
future
yuan
spread
spread
out,
out,
competition,
stabilizing the shaking
the test
mountain.
would be extremely
What a
harsh.
terrifying young man.
Being able to take
This
the
kind
first
of height
step today
had
was
far
a good thing
surpassed
after
the younger
all.
generation.
Yan Hongzhu
It was
and Jian
unheard of.
Shui,
Not far
caught
away,
up,
and
immediately
immediately
and
sat
by
down
Hongzhu
to adjust
arrived.
their breathing.
When they saw the battle, their
Stabilizing the
expressions
chaotic
changed in
changed.
their bodies.
The two of you
Ningchen
should watch
wasn't in a
carefully.
hurry.
This
He
young man's
patiently
martial
waited for the two to
cultivation
wake
base
up
might
before
not be as high
continuing
as
on
the
the road.
enforcement elders, or even the two of you. Fortunately,
But the height of his
the
sword
two
is
didn't
truly
spend
shocking.
too much time.
Even the
After a
enforcement
quarter
elder
of an
is a
hour,
bit inferior.
Yan Hongzhu
said
and Jian
Sect Master
Shui
Yuheng
woke up
seriously.
one after another.
All the experts
barely
of the world,
suppressing the
from
injuries in their
Xiantian to the
bodies.
three calamities,
Let's go.
walked the
Before
same
it
path.
gets dark,
But the
try to get to the
3,000
nearest
paths
city
of the Grand Dao
Ningchen
all led to
greeted
the same
two,
destination,
and immediately took
sometimes
Ruashi to the
cultivation
north.
base
Yan
wasn't the only
Hongzhu and
factor
Jian
that
Shui
determined
got up and
strength.
stepped forward to
This
follow.
young man's sword
Late
was
at
truly
night,
shocking.
in a strange
Adding
and
on his
desolate
speed,
place.
It wasn't
strange
strange
mountain
for him
city
to
was
be able to
located
fight
on
the
top of it.
enforcement elder
It was
to this
strange and
extent.
magnificent.
However,
like a
what
city
he
of
cared about
immortals
the
in the
most
human
was that
world,
this person
but
still
also
hadn't
like a
pulled
city
out
of
his
demons.
sword.
That
A
meant
cold
this
wind
person
blew,
still wasn't
and a black
at his
stream of
strongest
light
state.
flashed.
A
Sword-style
cold
Nirvana.
murderous aura came out.
The Nirvana sword
Yi
appeared
Jingdu,
once more,
dressed in black
scarlet
clothes
swords
and a black
appeared
hat,
one after another,
stepped into the city in
transforming
front of
into
him.
a stream of
The
swords
city of
that shot
assassins.
out.
Yuluo
Xiao
life
Wuming's eyes
extermination
narrowed.
sect.
His left
The
hand
most
pointed
terrible
forward,
forbidden area
drawing
in
in
the southern
yuan
tomb.
energy to assist
Today,
his sword.
the three
Azure
sect
light
masters
illuminated
returned
the
and
night
silently
sky.
walked into
His
a
sword
hall.
collided with the
a rumbling
Nirvana sword.
sound,
The
the
sword
door
of
of
the
the
hall
hall
opened.
opened.
In
And
the
the
aftershocks
hall,
cut open
rows
one
of red
huge
candles
ravine
were lit,
after another on the
illuminating
ground.
the silent hall.
The unimaginable
Yi Jingdu
battle of
walked
swords
into the
caused
hall.
the ground to
After
collapse.
a few steps, he
Even with
stopped.
the protection
Fundu,
of
how
Sect
is it?
Master Yuheng
At this
and
moment,
the four
a
grand
beautiful
elders,
young woman appeared
it was
and
difficult
asked,
to stop the
unfathomable,
fact that the
a great
mountain's
enemy.
appearance was
Yi
rapidly
Jingdu
changing.
replied,
Outside the battle,
I've never seen you have
Yinixuan
such a
and Bai
high
Hongzhu were
evaluation of
watching
anyone.
with rapt attention.
It seems that this
Seeing
young
this
man is
terrifying
really
battle,
not simple.
they felt an
Interesting.
unprecedented shock.
Mei Yingshua's mouth curved into a smile.
So there was already someone
Fengdu
in the
advised
younger
his second
generation
sister
who
that
had
this
reached
person
such a
is not
height.
easy to deal
Reporting
with.
to Sect
He's
Master,
not someone you can play
we've
with.
already investigated
Be careful
this
not to
person's
set yourself
origin.
on fire.
He's an outer
Yi
disciple
Jingdu
that
lightly
Crimson
said,
Lotus Peak
men
only
always have
recruited
weaknesses.
3 months ago.
Sometimes
He comes from
a
the
woman's
Eastern
body can
Tianqiu
be a better
dynasty.
killing weapon
His background
than the cold
and status
sword in
are
your
ordinary.
hand. He should
Mei
be
Yingshuo
intentionally
chuckled.
hiding something.
Oh, I've said what I should
said
say.
a deacon elder
I have no
respectfully.
right to interfere
Sect
with
Master
second
Yuheng
sister's
nodded.
decision.
Knowing this
Take
was
care
enough.
of yourself.
If he hadn't
Yi
guessed wrong,
Jingdu raised his
this
hand
person should
and
have come
pressed
from
the
the
edge
other
of his
four
black
regions.
hat.
Without
He wasn't
saying
someone
anything
from the
more,
southern tomb.
he walked towards the
Otherwise,
back of the hall.
it was impossible
hall,
for him to
the
not
red
have heard
candles
of such a
flickered,
powerful young
reflecting a
expert.
charming face.
Wuming,
Mei
there's no
Yingshua's
need to
eyes
continue
flashed
fighting.
with a touch of playfulness. As she
Sect
looked
Master
towards the
Yuheng
distant
moved
north
and arrived
It had been a
beside
long
Xiao
time
Wuming.
since she
He
had met
extended
someone
his
so
hand
worthy of
and
killing.
pressed down on the
Days
sword
without
he was
waves
about to
were really
unsheath.
lonely and
Xiao
unbearable.
Wuming nodded
In
and
the
did not
territory
attack
of the
again.
Migres
He
dynasty,
sheathed his sword
the
and
road
stopped
to the
fighting.
north was long
Friend,
and far.
why don't we talk
Half a month
inside?
later,
In the
Master
boundless
Yuheng
wilderness,
looked at the young man
the four
in
of
front
them
of
met
him.
a caravan
Deference
that was
is
also
no
heading
substitute
north.
for obedience.
The leader was a
Ning
middle-aged
Chen
man
nodded
around
and
40
restrained
years
his
old.
sword insight
He was
as he
friendly
spoke
and
calmly,
hospitable, and dragged the four of them along. Ning Chen did not
Chapter
refuse,
417.
but he did not
Within the
expect
profound
to cause a lot of
pavilion,
trouble for
sect
himself.
Master Yuheng,
In a caravan
Wuming,
under normal
and Ning Chen
circumstances,
had already been
it was
inside
not
for a
allowed
long
to bring a
time.
wife or
The
daughter.
four grand elders were waiting outside, waiting for news.
However,
Yi
the
Nishuan and Li
middle-aged man
Hangzhu
leading
were
the
also
caravan
waiting
this
outside.
In
Without
addition to
Sect
delivering
Master
goods,
Yuheng's permission,
also
they
happened
weren't
to be
allowed
on the
to
way
enter.
back to the ancestral
No one knew
home
what
to
the three
visit
of
his
them were
relatives.
talking about.
So he
When
brought
the
his
sun
wife
was about to
along.
rise,
The leader's
Hong Yi
wife,
walked out
Yao Shi,
and walked
looked
towards
very
the
young,
sparring stage
only
at the
around
peak.
30 years
Sect
old.
Master Yuheng
She was very
and
charming
Xiao Wuming
and
appeared
did
after
not lose
him.
out to Ruoxi.
Looking at the youth walking
she was
away,
very
a
enthusiastic
complicated
towards
light
Ning Chun
flashed through their
and
eyes.
the others who were
This
traveling
person's
along the way.
existence had already
So
broken the
enthusiastic
balance of
that
the
it was a
100
little
dynasties.
unbearable.
It
In
was
just
hard
a
to
few
imagine
days,
that a youth
the
with
4 women
ordinary
had
talent
gotten along
could
well
grow
with
to
each
such
other,
a terrifying
whispering
level.
to each other and
Yishuan
giggling.
Hongzhu remembered
After
today's
rushing
lesson.
for 3 days,
In the younger generation,
the group arrived at the
you
most
aren't the ones
prosperous
walking
hinterland
at the
of
very
the
front.
Migres dynasty.
In the future,
the caravan
this person
stopped
will
in
be the
Elan
peak
City
that
to
no
rest
one in your
temporarily.
generation can
The
avoid.
night was like water,
Said Sect
and the
Master
lights were
Yuheng.
waning.
Yi Nishuan
In the
and
room,
Li and Hongzhu were
Hong Yi
silent.
sat quietly at the
Even
table.
now, her
They
eyes
still
looking
found
at
it
the
hard to
flickering
believe
lights.
that someone of
no
the
one
same
knew what
age
she
had
was thinking.
surpassed them by so
It was
much.
late at night.
At the peak of
and
the
most
mountain,
of the people in the
iron
caravan
chains
had fallen
swayed and the
asleep.
clouds meandered.
After rushing for
One
so
by
many
one,
days,
the outer
everyone
sect
was
disciples
exhausted
who went up to
and
challenge
went back
were
to their
defeated.
rooms early
The
to
top
rest.
10 disciples
Dang
of the
dang
inner
at this
sect
moment,
were all
the door
extraordinary
was
people.
knocked.
Only
And a
when the
charming
real
voice
battle
sounded
began
from
did
outside
the outer
the door.
sect disciples,
Young Master
who had
Ning
been
may I
raring
come
to
in?
go before,
Hearing the voice
realized
of the
how
person
weak
who
they
came.
were.
Gradually,
Ning Chun frowned
fewer
slightly.
and fewer people
This lady,
challenged Hong Yi.
why did she
On
come
the
at this
sparring
time?
stage, with a
The
creak,
10th inner sect
before the
disciple
person
Yin
in the room could
Tianyuan was
answer,
holding his spear.
Yao Shi had already pushed the
forced
door
back
and
dozens
entered.
of people.
Her charming
At this
face
moment,
had a gentle
Hong Yi
smile,
walked onto the stage,
and she was wearing a
His
thin
aura
red
was
and
as
pink
calm
dress,
as water,
looking very
making
charming.
him seem like the most
Sister
ordinary
Ruoxi is
person.
asleep.
This greatly
So I was
shocked
worried
the
that no
disciples
one
below.
would take care of you.
Ning Chun greets
I'm not
you.
used to it.
After
So I
saying
came
that,
to ask if
his
you need
aura
anything.
changed and a powerful
Yao Shi
airflow
stepped
spread
forward
out.
and said softly,
In the next moment,
"Thank you for
Hong
your
Yi moved
concern,
and
Madam
disappeared.
Yao.
I was
Yin
just about
Tianyuan
to
was
go to
startled.
sleep.
He
There's
only
nothing
saw a
I'm
blur
not used
approaching
to.
him.
It's
When
getting
he
late.
came back to his
So
senses,
please go back and
he had
rest
already
early.
been pushed off the
Ning
stage
Chun wasn't
by
a
an
fool.
irresistible
Naturally,
force.
defeating his
that Madam
opponent
Yao
in one
didn't
move
just come
shocked
to
everyone.
everyone.
There was
Before
no
they could even
euphemism
see
in
the
her
battle
words,
clearly,
and she
it was
directly
already
sent him
over.
off.
As the
Yao
red
Shi
cloaked
gently
man
laughed
walked
and
down
took
the
2
stage,
steps forward.
the people
Arriving
under the
in front
stage
of the young man
automatically
in front
parted
of her,
to make a path
she
for
wrapped
him.
her arms around
Looking
his
at the
neck
red
and
clothed
bowed,
young man
saying,
walking away step
"Young
by
master."
step, to keep
The
people
abnormally
oppressive
oppressive
silence quickly
Isn't that
erupted
too
into a
impolite?
wave of cheers.
Also tell me if I shout right now and
someone
say that it
actually
was young
succeeded.
master. In the
Who
distance,
forcefully brought the
Sect
servant
Master
here.
Yuheng stood
Who
quietly.
would everyone believe?
Looking at Ning Chun
With a
walking
warm
down the
jade in
mountain,
his
he
arms.
said,
Ning
Wuming,
Chun's eyes
take him as
gradually
your
turned
disciple.
cold. Xiao
Madam,
Wuming's eyes
do I look
flashed
like
as he
someone
calmly
who's
said,
afraid of being
"This
criticized?
person's attainments in the
Heh.
sword have
If
already
young
surpassed
master
mine.
isn't afraid of
I
being
don't have the
criticized,
qualifications.
then are you not afraid
It's
of
only a
Sister
name.
Ruoxi
The 100
misunderstanding?
Empire competition
Yao Shi's
is about
body
to
leaned
begin.
closer until her whole body was in his arms.
He needs to have
Her
an
soft
official
body
identity
pressed against the
said
former's
Sect
chest
Master
as she
Yuheng.
whispered.
Perhaps
Ning
we can
Chun's
ask
eyes
the
narrowed,
ancestor to come
and a
out
dangerous
of
light
seclusion
flickered in them.
and let him personally
Then what
take
does
them
Madam
in as
mean?
his disciples.
What should I do?
Xiao Wuming suggested. The patriarch
A
is
night of
currently
pleasure,
breaking through to the
sharing the
great
joy of
circle.
being intimate.
Unless it's absolutely
Speaking of which,
necessary,
young master
we can't
won't lose
disturb
out.
him. Let's
Yao
do as I
Shi's
said.
red
For
lips
now,
stopped
said
next to the
Yuheng.
former's ear.
Xiao Wuming nodded and did not say anything else. He turned around and left. As a disciple who had surpassed his master,
as the saying goes,
he felt ashamed to
wine is
accept
poison
the
to
title
the
of master
intestines
in name,
and lust is a
he
steel
really
knife
didn't
to
know
the
what
bone.
kind of expert
Ning
in the
Chun
world
wasn't
was
someone who was
qualified
easily
to be this
bewitched by
person's
beauty.
teacher.
But
However,
this woman
no
definitely
matter
wasn't
what,
Madam
Hongzhu
Yao.
did not deserve
With
to
a
be
soft
called
and fragrant
senior
body
martial
in his
sister.
arms.
The rule
The
of entering
seductive
the
fragrance
sect
of
first
orchids
should be
constantly lingering
At the foot of the
mountain
nose, the bamboo
Ning
cabin
Chun's
was
eyes
quiet
grew
and
colder and
tranquil.
colder.
Ruoxi
He was
looked
very
at the young
curious.
lord standing
How
in
could there
front
be
of the
such a
cabin
bold
and
woman
asked
in this
softly,
world?
Does
No
young
one
lord
can really
deny
wish
Madam
to
Yao's charm?
participate in this
She was at her
100
most mature
competition
and beautiful
on behalf
age,
of the Yuheng
charming
Holy
and
Land.
charming.
It's just a
Unfortunately,
fair trade.
a blockhead
I
like
need to
Ning
borrow
Chun
the
was an
Alyak divine
example.
cauldron to
Heaven
save
knows,
Ghost Girl.
If this
Ning
woman
Chun
was
said
Ruoxi,
slowly,
is young lord confident?
or a man? Would a certain
reached
someone
out
still be
and
so
picked up the
indifferent?
bamboo leaves
Unfortunately,
that had fallen from her
the
red
women
robes.
Ningchen knew either
Which
had
matter?
a cold
The
temperament
100
or a
Empire
pure heart.
competition or
None of
saving
them would
Ghost
think
Girl.
of using such means
Ningchen
to
turned
charm
around
others.
and asked.
In the next
Both,
room,
Ruashi
woke up.
The matter of the 100
Originally,
Empire
she
competition
wanted
is
to see
hard
if
to
her
say.
young master was
It's very
asleep.
likely that
But
there
when
will
she
be
saw the
peerless
light in his
geniuses
room
like
was on,
Starfall,
and the
in
door
the 100
wasn't
Empire
closed,
competition.
she was about to
Right
knock
now,
on the
I
door.
only have half of my
However,
body.
she
It won't
suddenly
be
stopped
easy
when
for
she
me to
heard a
suppress
voice from
them.
inside the
As
room.
for whether the
She could
revival
recognize
technique will
Madame
be able
Yao's
to
voice.
awaken Ghost Girl.
And of course she could
Although I
also
don't have
recognize
absolute
her young
certainty,
master's voice.
there should be at
It's
least
already
a
so
70%
late.
chance.
What is Madame
Ningchen
Yao doing in her
replied.
young master's
Ruashi's
room?
eyes flashed
Through the
with
gap
emotion.
in the door,
She really
she could
hoped this
clearly
was the
see the
case.
situation inside
She really
the room.
didn't want to see the
She
young
didn't know
lord's
if Madame Yao
disappointed
deliberately
expression
didn't
again.
close the door,
At the peak of
or
the
if she
mountain,
forgot. There were
At
tens
this
of
moment,
thousands of people
Ruashi was
competing.
standing in front of the
After
door,
someone successfully
quietly
defeated
watching
the
the
top
scene in
10
the room.
inner sect disciples.
A faint smile flashed
Hope
across
rose
her
in the
beautiful
hearts of the
face.
outer sect
She knew
disciples
her
again.
young master's
There were
temperament better
constantly
than
people
anyone
going up
else.
to challenge them.
If he was really
Hoping
greedy
to
for
obtain
beauty,
the qualifications
then he wouldn't have
to compete
quarreled
with
with
his
his inner
eldest
sect
grandson
disciples
in the
heavenly
heavenly
mandate
mandate
competition.
competition. There were
One
many
day
after
beautiful
another
women in
passed.
this world,
Ning Chen
but
did
among
not
those
go up
she
the
had
mountain
seen,
again.
there
It
were
was a
two
pity
that
that Hangzhou
surpassed everyone.
came down the mountain.
One was Mu Qingxue.
Her master had said
and
that
the
if she
other was
wanted
the
to go
ninth
further
princess
on the
of the
path
Xia
of swordsmanship,
Kingdom,
it would be best
needless
for her
to
to
say,
go down the
Mu
mountain.
Qingxue's temperament and
this
appearance
nominal
were
senior
extraordinary.
apprentice brother.
The only
Ning
one
Chen
who could
wasn't a
stand
person
shoulder
who
to
kept
shoulder with
martial
her
arts a
was the
secret.
stunning
Even if
16-year-old
Rui
ninth
Hangzhou
princess
asked for
of the
advice,
Xia
he
Kingdom,
wouldn't keep it a secret.
Unfortunately,
Yun
her young
Tianyuan,
master was a
who was
blockhead.
defeated by
When
Ning
his
Chen in
eldest
one
grandson
move,
appointed the
also
marriage,
went down the mountain
he rejected
once.
this marriage that in her eyes was a match
Others might
made
not
in
have
heaven.
seen it. Looking
But
at
he
the
deeply
current
felt
situation,
that the strength of the
she
young
didn't
man
need
in
to
front
think
of
to
him
know that her
was
young
much
master
higher
was
than his
forced.
own.
Even
Because
the
Madame
Madame
Yao
Yao
was
just
just
an
an
ordinary
compared
person.
to him.
He didn't want to
Gradually,
show his
the
skills
news
and
spread
only
and
hurt
some
her.
intersect
Ruashi's
disciples
mouth
who hadn't
curved
met
into a
before
smile.
also came down
She
the
didn't
mountain
intend
to
to
ask
push
for
the door
advice.
open.
The
and
quiet
disturb the
bamboo
young
hut
master's
became
good
noisy.
time.
When
Anyway,
Xiao Wuming came
she
to know
can't
about
sleep if
this,
she
he
goes back
frowned.
now.
But he
Might
didn't
as
say
well watch
anything.
the show.
Wuming, don't
Inside
worry.
the room,
This person
Ning Chen
isn't
could
a
feel
narrow-minded
Ruashi's
person.
aura outside the
He
door.
won't be
Seeing
dissatisfied
that
with
the
the
girl
Holy
didn't
Land
come in
over
to help
such a
him,
small matter.
he couldn't help but
Yuheng
feel
calmly
angry
said.
and amused.
The grand elders were all in seclusion, so they
This
didn't
girl's
have
burden
much
was
time
too
to
big.
teach their disciples.
She was actually laughing
now
at
that
him.
a young man
Teacher,
with
please
unfathomable
respect
strength had
yourself.
appeared. Ning Chen
Whether
reached
it
out
was
to
out of
push
curiosity,
Yaoshi away, or because
just as
they
he was
really
about
had
to
a
get
question
up,
about martial
his breathing
arts to
suddenly
ask.
became sluggish.
The bamboo hut at
and
the
his
foot of the
entire
mountain
body
was
felt
destined
weak.
to not be as
Young
peaceful
master,
as before.
tonight you are mine.
Ruashi,
Yaoshe
do you know
gently
who taught
smiled.
senior brother
Her
his
arms
martial
were
arts?
soft and boneless.
Rui Hangzhou
As they
was
wrapped
sitting
around
on
the
the edge
former
of the bed.
once more.
She looked
Her
at
entire
Ruashi,
body
who was
leaned
cleaning
forward
the
once
hut,
more.
and softly
Her
asked,
red lips parted
before
slightly,
personally witnessing
and the
the
fragrance
battle
of
at the
spring
profound
filled the room,
pavilion,
causing
she really
the fire
couldn't
in one's
believe that
body
there was
to
someone
rise
in this
rapidly.
world
Poison,
who could fight her
Ning
master
Chen
to
felt
the
the
unusual
unusual
changes in the Phoenix's body and narrowed his eyes. Although
It
her
seemed that
master
he was
had
blind
held
this
back,
time.
her
Although
senior
there were
brother
many
clearly
strange
hadn't
poisons
used
in
his
the
full
world.
strength either.
The ones that
The
could
young
affect
master
an
has
innate
never
rancor
taken a
could be
master
counted
before.
on one's
He
fingers.
practiced his
This
martial
Madame
arts
Yao
on his
obviously
own.
came prepared.
However, there are
When did
several
Madame
seniors
realize
who have
that I
given
have
him
martial
pointers.
arts?
If
Or
you're
rather,
curious,
what
you
is
can
Madame's
ask him
objective?
yourself.
Ning
Ruashi
Chen asked
replied while
indifferently.
tidying up the hut.
Does young master
Senior
have martial
brother
arts?
doesn't seem to like
This
me
servant
very
really
much.
didn't know.
I've gone down
If
the
young
mountain
master
so
is
many
worried
times,
about this
but
aphrodisiac,
I've never seen him
then
smile
you can
even
rest
once.
assured.
Rui
As long
Hangzhou
as young
sighed.
master and
Miss
this servant
Ruashi
have a
worries
night
too
of
much.
pleasure,
The young
this
master
poison
has
will
always been
naturally
like
be
this.
cured.
You've only
Outside
known
the
each other
room,
for a short time.
Ruashi
noticed
if
that
he
the
really
situation
smiled at you
inside
from
the
the
room was a
start,
bit
then you
strange.
should be worried.
Not daring to be
Aside from the
careless,
people he
she
cherishes,
immediately pushed
the young
door
master
open
only
and walked
smiles
in.
when he scams
Ruashi,
people.
you go out first.
Ruashi whispered.
Ning Chen's
As
expression
soon as her
changed
voice
slightly.
fell,
The
with
door
a flip
creaked
of his
open,
palm,
and
he
Ning
wanted
Chen
to
walked
send
in.
Ruashi out of the room.
Unexpectedly,
Sitting on the edge of the bed,
Yaoshe waved her
immediately
delicate
stood up.
hand. Her
and
beautiful
dispersed the
face
former's
revealed a
palm.
respectful
Her delicate
expression.
face flashed
Senior
with a charming
brother,
smile.
Hangzhou, come with
Young
me.
master doesn't
Ning Chen
need to
said.
send sister
Rui
Ruashi
Hangzhou
out.
nodded and followed
This
him
servant
out.
doesn't
In
care
the
if there
bamboo
is one more
forest,
person
Ning
to
Chen
serve
looked
young
at
master.
the woman in front of him.
So Madame also
calmly
knows
asked,
martial arts.
How long have
to be
you
able
been
to
in the
hide
three
it so
disasters?
perfectly?
This
Less
servant
than
is
2 years.
impressed.
Ning
Ning
Chen's
Chen's eyes
honestly
flashed with a
replied.
cold light.
Ning Chen fell
Aside
silent.
from Fan Lingyu,
Not
who
bad,
had the Book of Chaos,
but compared to those
this was
monstrous
the first
geniuses
time he
had
saw
seen
someone
before.
who could hide
There
their
was
martial
still a
arts
big gap.
aura so flawlessly.
His deal with sect master
Young master
Yuheng
overpraises
was to
me.
help the Yuheng
To walk
Holy
the
Land
Jianghu,
obtain third
one
place
must have some
in the
ability.
100 Empire
However,
competition.
this
The
servant's
difficulty
performance
was not
in bed will
ordinary.
make young master
The 100
even more
Empire
impressed.
competition had
Yaoshe
always been
reached out to
extremely
touch the
fierce.
former
lover's handsome face. Her eyes
Aside
were full
from
of
the various
splendor.
great inheritances
Such a young
of the
master
southern
was
tomb.
truly shameful.
Even the great
Countless
powers
old
of the other
monsters
three
who had
regions
lived for hundreds
would
of years
secretly
would
send
die
their
of shame.
disciples to
But for
compete
this
for a
night,
spot.
this person was
So
hers.
what level Rui
To be
Hangzhu
honest,
and
she
that
was really
Yinishuan
reluctant
could
to
reach
kill
in
the
the
next
next
few
few
days
days
was
was
crucial
crucial
to whether or not they could
Unfortunately,
obtain a
such a
spot in
young
the top
master
three.
was too much of
Let
a
me
threat.
see the sword on your
Once
back.
he escaped the
Ning
influence
Chen
of the
said.
aphrodisiac,
Rui Hangzhu's eyes
she
were a
wasn't
bit
sure she could
suspicious.
suppress him.
She took the
Ning
sword
Chen
from her
felt the
waist
killing
and
intent
handed
from
it to
Yao
him
Sure
with
at
a
this
smile.
moment.
I almost
Flatly,
forgot.
he said.
Senior
It seems
brother
that
is
after
the sword
tonight,
god.
this
It
servant's
was
life
Hangzhu's
will also be
negligence.
given to Madam.
I should have taken out
This
this
is the
sword
only
earlier
way
for senior brother to evaluate.
Don't speak
However,
nonsense.
before tonight is over,
Ning Chen lightly
this servant will
reprimanded,
let young
but
master
didn't take
taste
it to
the
heart.
best taste in
Looking
the world.
at the sheathed sword
Yao
in
Sure
his hand,
smiled,
he frowned.
her tone not
The
without
sword
regret.
wasn't bad.
Then before
the aura
I die,
of a king was
can
drawn
this
but not
servant know
released.
Madam's true identity?
It should be a sword once
so I can
used
be
by
a
a
ghost
top
under
sword
your
expert.
skirt.
However,
finally
the sword
asked.
was too masculine.
Yaoshe leaned forward
It wasn't
and gently
suitable for
said,
Rui Hongzhi.
"Young master,
Switch to a
please
different
carefully
sword.
remember this
This
servant's
sword
name.
won't be of much
This
help to your
servant's
strength.
surname is Mei,
said Ningchen.
and my name
Rui
is
Hongzhi's
Shui.
eyes flashed
I am
with
the
surprise.
second sect master
Her
of
master
Yu
had
Luo's
also
life
said the same
extermination
thing.
gate.
However,
Many thanks.
this sword had been
This
passed
servant
down
will
by her
remember.
ancestor.
When
She
erecting
had
a
never been
monument
able
for
to
Madame,
find a suitable
there is
sword
no
for
need
herself,
to replace it with a
so
nameless
she had always
monument.
used this sword.
As he spoke,
Please give me some
Ningchen stood up.
pointers. Red
Said Rui
phoenix
Hongzhi
flames rose around
respectfully.
his body.
There's a red
burning
divine
away
tree
the
on the
strange
mountain.
poison on his
If you
body.
want a sword,
In the next
it'll
instant,
depend on whether
a
or
red
not you
light
can
flashed
convince
past.
Sect Master Yu
A sword was
and
pointed
the Grand
at his
Elders
throat.
to bring that
Mei
tree
and
to me.
Shui's eyes narrowed.
Said Ningchen
Before
calmly.
she could recover,
Rui
a
Hongzhi's
strand
eyes
of
widened.
hair flew up
Could
and
seeing your
quietly
brother
scattered.
be talking about
The
the
sword
blood-stained
and red
penetrated her
sandalwood?
body?
Ningchen
And
gave her
blood
some
dripped down
advice
like plum
and did not
blossoms
say
in
anything
winter.
else.
It was
He
dazzling.
turned around,
Whether
and
it
walked
was
into
Mei
the wooden
Shui
house,
or Mei Shui,
based on the properties of the red
impossible to
bamboo.
tell.
She did
This
not
wood was the most
understand just
suitable
what had gone
divine
wrong.
material.
How could he
However,
still have the
whether
strength
she
to
could
attack
obtain it
after
or
being
not would
poisoned
depend
by
on
the
her ability.
aphrodisiac?
At the
Within
top
the
of the
silent
mountain,
hall of
the outer
Luo's
sect
life
disciples'
extermination
challenges
gate,
came to an
a
end.
life tablet
The
cracked
inner sect
and
disciples
fell onto a
once
table.
again began their
Spiritual
battles for
energy
the spots
silently
to enter the
dissipated.
100 Empire
In front,
competition.
a black-clothed
Ningchen
man
would
with a
occasionally
black
go
hat
up the
looked at
mountain
the
to
cracked
complete
life
his
tablet
mission.
on the table.
Without any
His cold
surprise
face
or
did not
danger,
change at
he
all.
entered the top
After
four.
looking at it
At
for a
first,
moment, he turned
everyone
and
was
left.
shocked by this
He had
young
already
man's
warned
sudden
her,
appearance,
but she still
then they
insisted
gradually
on
got
doing
used
it.
to it.
She could
Now
not
they were
blame
numb to
anyone.
it.
Bang.
It seemed that even
the
if
door
he
to the
defeated
hall
Yi
closed
Nishuan
while the
and
rows
Rui
of
Hongzhi,
candles were completely
who had always
extinguished,
occupied the top
causing
two
the hall
spots of
to
the inner
return
sect
to a
disciples.
cold and silent state
It wouldn't
once
be
more.
unacceptable.
And there wasn't a
Ningchen's
trace
opponent
of aura
for the
left.
top four was the
In the
third
end-ranked
ranked
inner sect
Ningchen
disciple,
glanced
the
at
young
the
woman,
lifeless Mei Shui
although her
lying
talent
on the
didn't
ground.
lose to anyone.
With a flip of his
Due
palm,
to her age,
a phoenix
she was
shadow
unable
appeared
to
behind
defeat
him.
Yi Nishuan
A red
and Rui
light
Hongzhi.
flashed and
There
temporarily
wasn't much
swallowed her
suspense
into
in
the
the
battle.
phoenix's body.
As soon as
Just as
Ningchen
the
went
figure
up,
of the phoenix
he sent the
disappeared,
young woman off
a
the martial
familiar
stage.
fragrance suddenly
The huge
wafted into
difference in
his nose
strength
from
caused the
behind.
young woman to
Before
cry
he could
for a long
react,
time.
a warm and delicate body leaned close
The
to
next
him
battle
and
was
hugged him.
the battle that
Young
everyone had
master,
been waiting for.
Ruashi's
The
red
two
lips
most
parted
outstanding
slightly.
geniuses
Her
of the
eyes
inner sect
gradually
disciples,
and her
Yi
body
Nishuan
temperature
and Rui
continued
Hongzhi,
to rise.
would definitely
Half of her
be able
clothes
to
were
determine
undone,
a victor this time,
revealing a large
chain
area
swayed
of
and
snow
rustled.
white skin.
The
white-robed Yi
Nishuan,
who
walked
could deal
onto
with
the
Mei
martial
Shui
stage,
indifferently and
calmly
unmoved,
waiting for the
couldn't
opponent.
help but
He
feel
had been
his
looking
heart
forward
sink
to
at
the
this
moment.
moment. Cold
15
sweat
minutes
dripped down
30
his
minutes.
forehead.
Almost
This is
an hour
troublesome.
had passed.
He almost
But
forgot
the red
about this
bamboo of
girl,
regret still
although he
hadn't
had the
appeared.
phoenix flames,
Just as everyone
and was
not
getting
afraid of any
impatient from
strange
waiting.
poison,
A beautiful
this girl
woman
was not.
slowly walked over
Worried
from
about
afar,
hurting Ruashi,
dragging a huge
Ningchen
divine
didn't
tree
dare to
behind
force her away.
She had finally
Reluctantly,
arrived at the last
he turned
moment
around
and tried to break free from the former's grasp. The process was very
Chapter
difficult.
418.
By Hongzhu's appearance, and dragging the
Ruashi's
bloodstained
arms
red
were tightly
sandalwood
wrapped
from
around
the
him.
mountain shocked
Every
everyone.
time he broke free,
Rumor had it
she
that
would
the
hug him
history
again.
of this divine
Her
would
snow-white
even be
skin was
compared
faintly
to the jadeite
discernible.
holy land.
A certain person
it was
was
so
not a
ancient
saint.
that it could scare
The
people
cold
to
sweat
death.
on his forehead
On the battle
indicated
stage,
that he was
Yi
not a
Nishuan's
gentleman.
eyes narrowed
In
slightly.
fact,
Ruashi's
he didn't know
heart
why
was
by
easier to
Hongzhu
see
had
than
brought
anyone
this wood.
else. Senior
As long
brother,
as she could stay
by
by young
Hongzhu put
master's
down the
side,
rope in her hand,
she didn't care about
and walked
anything
forward
else.
respectfully.
She just wanted to
Ningchen
be young
nodded.
master's
He
maid who
glanced at
served
the
tea and
divine wood
water
in front of him.
She didn't
and
want
said
to go one
calmly,
step further.
Wait a moment.
After a long
It'll
time,
be done soon.
Ningchen
After
reluctantly
saying
broke
that,
free from
Ningchen
Ruashi
walked
and
in
placed
front
her
of
on
the
the
divine
bed.
wood.
Just as
He
he was
flipped his
about to
palm,
circulate
and
his
the divine
energy
would
to help
shatter
her
and
expel the
pieces.
poison,
The most
he didn't
durable
expect
part,
a pair
the
of
bloodstained
arms to
would
wrap
pour,
around him again.
flew out and
Young
landed
master,
in Ningchen's hand.
Ruashi's clothes
He condensed
had
his
slipped down
energy
most of
into
the
his
time.
sword finger
The
and
skin under
sliced
her
down.
underwear was
With
faintly
chips flew
discernible.
everywhere
It
and
made
landed
one's
on the
blood
ground.
boil.
In the
Your young
distance,
master must have
Xiao
owed
Ning
you in a
quietly
previous
looked
life.
at the battle stage.
Ningchen smiled
Light flashed
bitterly.
through his deep eyes.
Once again,
With
he
this
grabbed the
person's
entangled
age,
arms
his
and broke
attainments
free.
in the sword were
While
truly
enduring the
shocking.
torture of his
This
maid.
wood was tough and
He
durable.
circulated his
He had
energy
spent
to
a lot of
expel
time
the poison.
cutting it.
The
Only
process
this
of
young man
expelling
could
the
cut it
poison
into a
was
sword so
extremely
easily.
difficult. On the
It took
mountain
nearly
peak,
half an hour.
tens of thousands
It wasn't
of
until
people
dawn
quietly
broke
waited.
that Ningchen
The sea
barely
of clouds
forced the
churned.
aphrodisiac
Everyone's
out of
attention
Ruashi's
was
body.
focused on the
His
battle
clothes
stage.
were soaked in sweat.
No one knew when
It
it would
was more
start.
difficult than
Chi
fighting
Chi.
with the powerhouse
The sound
of
of the
three
sword
disasters.
slicing through the divine
After
wood
the
resounded in
aphrodisiac was
everyone's
dispersed,
ears. Ruashi
Wuxia
fell
flew
into
into
a
the
deep
air
sleep.
one after another.
Ningchen used
The
his
sword
phoenix
embryo
energy to
gradually
adjust
took
her
shape,
body,
and its
after
sharpness was
replenishing her
faintly
vitality.
discernible.
He
Under
leaned against
everyone's
the bed
shocked
and
gazes,
closed his eyes for a
Hongi
short
waved her
rest.
finger.
An
and
hour
the divine
later,
wood was
the
cut
sky
into a
outside
strange
the door
blade.
was already bright.
Not long after,
It was a pity that
purple
Hong
sword
Zhu
with
and
traces
Jianshui
of blood
or didn't
appeared.
see Ruashi's
Red light
figure.
rose from Ningchen's
When they found
finger.
that Ningchen's
The
door had
extreme
not been
temperature
opened,
of the phoenix
they
fire
immediately
tempered the
understood.
sword.
Sure
Give me
enough,
your
it's
hand.
a pervert. When the sword was about to be formed,
her small nose and
Ningchen looked at the girl in front of him
and said,
she would not be able to escape
didn't
the
hesitate
claws
at
of
all
this
when she
pervert.
heard that.
How could there
She
be a
extended
man in
her
this
hand in
world
front
who
of
wasn't
Ningchen.
lustful?
Her
Not
delicate
to
hand
mention,
was dyed red.
Ruashi was a woman
Drops
who
of
could
blood
make
dripped
anyone
onto
with
the
his heart
sword.
flutter.
In the
In
next
the room,
moment,
Ruashi
a
woke
bloody
up.
light shone
After
brightly
a short
and
period
illuminated
of
the entire
confusion,
mountain.
memories
The
came
strange
flooding
blade
back.
took shape, and the
Thinking of
wind
her
and
performance
clouds
last
changed.
night,
The divine wood that
suddenly
had
turned
condensed
red.
the spiritual
When
chi
Ruashi
of the
woke
Holy
up,
Land,
Ningchen
for
also
thousands
felt
of
it
years,
and opened his eyes.
suddenly turned into
Seeing
a
the girl's
miracle.
red face,
Bai Hongzhu
he stood
gripped
up
her
and couldn't
sword
help but smile.
and felt as if her heart
Now you know
and
to be
sword
shy.
were connected.
Last
Her
night,
eyes
your
shined
young
brightly.
master wasn't
Only
liked.
now did she truly
Young master,
understand
don't
what
laugh.
her master
You go
and
out
senior
first.
brother meant
I want
by
to
her
put on my
sword.
clothes.
I've made you wait for a
Ruashi's
long
face
time.
was very hot.
Yen Hongzhu
She covered
moved
half
and
of her
instantly
face with the
arrived on the
quilt and
martial
said,
stage.
"Oh."
She looked at her
Ningchen
opponent
no
and
longer
spoke,
teased the girl.
"Please," and turned
As
to
soon
walk
as he
out the
finished
door.
speaking, his white
Beast.
robes fluttered.
Seeing the
and a
former
cold
finally
sword
willing
tip
to
swept
come out,
across the stage.
Jian Shuier
A
whispered
white sword
softly.
light pierced into the
Ningchen
mind.
didn't care about it. No matter how
Hongzhu
beastly
waved
he
her
was,
sword.
he wouldn't
And
be
with
a
a
beast
kung
to her.
sound, the two
Not
swords
long after,
clashed.
the door
A
creaked
violent
open
wind
again.
blew.
Ruashi
true
walked out
essence
with the red
scattered in all
face.
directions.
Qi Feng changed his stance
When she
switching
saw
from
the three
defense
people
to
waiting
offense.
outside the room,
The purple-red
her
sword
face
tip
immediately
slashed
became
across with
redder.
a dazzling
Jian
brilliance.
Shuier was
Yi
surprised,
Xuan took half
seeing
a step
that the
back
former's
and turned
virginity
his
was
sword
still
around.
intact.
Then
He
he
couldn't
slashed
help
out
but
again.
glance at Ningchen
His sword was full
and
of
spit out
changes,
4 words
and
in
he was not
disdain.
at a disadvantage
Worse than
at
a
all.
beast.
The two swords clashed at an extreme speed. 100 moves had already passed, but no one was able
Chapter
to gain the upper
424.
hand. Under
was
the
a
plum
deadlock
tree
that was difficult to
Ningchen
break.
waved his hand,
Sect
and a
Master
red
Yu
light
Hung
flashed, and Xiao
Meng
Wuming were
Shua
watching
was
the
sent
battle
out of
from
the
afar.
phoenix's body.
They were also
Then,
attracted by
with
the
the flip of
intense
his
battle.
palm,
The
Yi
ground
Xuan
in
has
front of
already
him
been in
cracked
the 3
open
disasters
and
for
swallowed
quite
the
some
body
time.
of Yu Luo's
There should
second
still be a
master.
gap between
Hongzhu and Jian Shui,
but now it
who were
seems that
shocked
gap
and
has been
didn't
closed to the
understand what was
greatest
going
extent.
on.
Ruashi
Said
sighed
Master
softly
Yu Hung,
and explained what
Hongzhu's
happened
sword
last
has allowed
night.
her to gain
The
quite
young
a bit of an
master
advantage,
sealed his sword for
said
10
Xiao
years,
Wuming honestly,
so that he wouldn't kill
this
anyone.
so-called senior
He
brother
didn't
of hers
expect
has
that he
treated
wouldn't
her
get
pretty
what he
well.
wanted in the
But
end.
speaking of
The
which,
plum tree
is
swayed
there
and
really
rustled.
no need to follow the
Ningchen
rule
stood
of
under
entering
the
the
tree
sect first
and waved his hand
hands
to
to
build
build
a
a
new
new
grave.
Yu Hung. He
There
carved
are
exceptions
exceptions
to
to
everything
and
placed it
Hongzhu
in front of
doesn't
the grave
deserve to be called
Hopefully,
senior sister,
when the plum
said
blossoms
Xiao Wuming
bloom
calmly.
next year.
While
The
the
cold
two of
plum
them were
blossoms
talking,
reflect the
the
snow.
battle on the
Let's
martial
go.
stage had
Ningchen
already
turned
reached
and
its
walked
climax.
back. He
Both
called out to
sides
the
were
three,
pushing their
and then
cultivation
continued to
techniques
walk
to their
forward.
limits.
In the
They were
divine
about to
continent,
draw a
10
final
years had
conclusion
passed.
to this
The
battle
emperor of the
that
great
was
Xia had
difficult
grown
to
up.
determine a victor.
His political and
Wind and
military
lightning
skills were not
transformation.
inferior to the
Emperor
sages of
returns
the past.
boundless.
He tried
Yi
his
Xuan
best to
raised
govern
his
the
sword and
country
drew in
that
wind
was
and
greatly
lightning.
damaged
White
by the
light
divine
soared around his
tribulation.
body.
Kong
Dazzling
Yu and
Marquis
Marquis
blinded
did their
everyone's
best
eyes.
to assist the
Bai
emperor in
Hongzhu
governing
didn't
the
dare
country.
to be careless in
The fate
front
of
of
the
her
great
ultimate
Xia
move.
gradually recovered.
She condensed her
Above
yuan
the
into
heavenly
her sword
mandate
finger,
palace, and
purple
rays of
clouds
blood
red
appeared
light
again.
refined her
In
sword.
the north and south,
A purple red
the
light
northern
soaring
Ming
into the
imperial
sky.
court,
Her
and the
ultimate
barbarian
move had
dynasty
appeared at the same
had also
time.
reached their peak.
100 generations
After
of
the divine
mountains and
tribulation,
mountains,
one
the
divine
sword returns
continent
to
finally
nothingness.
survived the most
The two
difficult
extremes
time,
collided,
and
causing
showed
heaven
signs
of
of
a new
earth to
era.
lose color.
In front of the
Boundless
Ascension
sword
Valley,
intent crazily
figures
surged
appeared
out.
one after
Countless
another.
runes on
They
the
were
martial
all
stage
comrades
flickered,
who fought against
as if
Pluto.
they had reached their
Today
limits.
was the last time
they
they
were
met
unable
before
to
parting.
withstand the
Have you
terrifying
decided?
shockwaves.
Mu Qingxue
Looked at the
the two
red-haired
of them
man in
both
front of
retreated,
him and asked.
their mouths dyed
Yes.
red.
Suddenly,
Function nodded
the white
inside.
sword in Yi
There
Xuan's
can't be
hand
any more
snapped
wars.
and slashed across
Sealing
his
the two
face,
realms is the
leaving
best
behind
choice.
a trace of blood.
Mu Qingxue
The battle
didn't say
that hadn't
anything
been
else.
decided yet
He
had
looked
ended
at the
at
3
this
people
moment.
in front of him
After
and said
the sword
seriously,
broke, the
"See you
result
never."
was already decided.
See you never.
I've lost.
Daylily and Meng
said
Xuanji
Xuan
showed
as
a
he
nostalgic
steadied
smile
himself.
and said goodbye.
It's not that you've
In
lost,
the next moment,
but that your sword
the
has
yearning
lost.
blade appeared in Luan
Regret
Fengchen's
flashed
hand.
through by Hongzhu's
Majestic
eyes
and
as she
colorful
walked off the
fate
stage.
gathered the fate fate of the entire realm.
Disciple battle
Today,
had ended.
the passage between the two realms
The result was outside
sealed.
of everyone's
Daylily
expectations,
walked forward and
but it
gathered
also
the spirit
wasn't too
energy in
surprising.
100 miles
Amy
around her
Schwan,
blade,
and by
in an
Hongju's
instant,
strength had originally
an endless
been about
stream
the
of
same.
energy burst
It
out
wasn't certain
and
who
entered
would
the
win.
space passage
However,
in front of them.
a new
The
expert
energy
had
of the
appeared
world
amongst the
and the
intersect
fate of the
disciples.
entire realm poured
Whether
in.
or not by
The passage
Hongju would
between
be
the
able
two
to maintain
realms
her
trembled
position,
and gradually
as number
disappeared.
one would soon be
Let's
revealed.
go.
On
Since
the
the
martial
two territories
stage,
were about
by
to be
Hongju's
sealed,
red robes
they could
fluttered
not
in the
stay
wind.
for long.
Looking at
One
the figure in
Fengchen
front
called
of
out
her,
to the two
an
people
awkward
beside him
expression
and
appeared
walked
on
in.
her face.
Wang Yu and
She was
Ming
well
Xuanji
aware
nodded.
that the difference in strength between her and her senior
They took
apprentice
one last
brother
look
was
at
too
the
great.
beautiful divine
Even
land
some
in
of her
front of
moves
them
had been
and
taught to
followed
her
after
by her
him.
senior
Three
apprentice
figures,
brother.
one in front
This
and two
battle had no
behind,
meaning at all.
disappeared into
I
the
admit
space
defeat.
channel. The son of the Holy Land who looked up at peace, but being oppressed in front of everyone was another. That was rarely seen in 1,000 didn't have such a hobby, and the stunning dream lord of the highest heavens. The crowd went into the four poles and stayed away from the disputes without even fighting. World. That was too unreasonable. After the three of them entered, Sister Hongju, the spatial tunnel disappeared. You're not allowed to admit defeat. A pure white divine weapon flew back and stabbed into the ground. Who had just been defeated by Ningchen. Please return this saber to him. Everyone followed the voice and looked over. His final voice reverberated between heaven and earth. They immediately seemed to have found their backbone and loudly echoed without a sound. Jian Shui, was the granddaughter of the previous sect master, and pulled out the saber of remembrance. She had cultivated with the previous generation's grand elders since she was young. Of an eye. In terms of seniority, she was shockingly high. In the ruins of due to her young age, white light had always been suppressed by Yinyuan and by Hongju. Step by step. She walked to the front of the collapsed sword pool, which was why she was so angry, and everything was different. Hongju also felt a headache when she saw Jian Shui, but the people had changed. She hurriedly sent a voice transmission. A figure who had been waiting for a long time appeared. Even Master might not be able to defeat Senior Apprentice Brother, who had been expelled from Desolate City between us is too great. He had been guarding Desolate City for 10 years. Guarding this final memory was still angry. Second senior brother? So she couldn't care too much about it. She directly left onto the martial stage. He said he was going to search for eldest and senior brother's unfinished her teeth. Jian Luing Since he's so strong, what about you? I'm not afraid of having a few more people. Asked Jian Shui. Or glanced at Yinishuan and said, nodded. Are you coming up or not? The dilapidated fences and dilapidated walls around him. His figure flashed, and a look of reminiscence arrived on his face. He said calmly, Honored Master said that my temperament is not stable, but I don't know what the elders think. So it has always been difficult for me to understand the true meaning of the sword. And the other deacon elders frowned. Only it was here fine that Jian Shui was causing trouble. But why was Yinishuan also Master taught me? Elder Qingwei after talking for a short and was about to stop this farce when a dignified voice suddenly sounded in her whiter than snow. Don't stop them. She looked like a fairy from the Moon Palace as she headed west. Expression changed slightly looked at when she heard the identity of the owner of the complicated expression. She sat down again. After this farewell, on the martial stage, he did not know when they would meet again. The three of them. He hoped that she would live a happy life. He didn't say anything and directly walked down the stage. He had already obtained the qualification to participate in the 100 Empire competition of the previous generation and had no obligation to fight again. The teacher of the current You're not allowed to go down. How could Jian Shui disrespect or let him go? After hearing that her eldest grandson had passed away 10 years ago, Ningchen just fell silent. It's just that he might not come back. At this moment, imperial city of Great Master Yuheng's voice sounded in built heavenly mandate palace. Ningchen frowned slightly when he heard had now grown into a handsome young man, but he didn't insist. He wore a dragon robe, seeing Ningchen very heroic and extraordinary. Hand. A green sword flew from below the stage. At this moment in his hand, a beautiful figure in white appeared out of thin air in the main hall. Had been waiting for this moment. Looking at the young man on the dragon throne, she took a step forward. A hint of emotion and her sword moved along with her. It turned out that it had really been 10 years. Also flashed even this little fellow had grown so big. She couldn't defeat her senior brother. Seeing the woman who suddenly appeared, but with the help of these two body shook. She might really be able to fight. His face was filled with disbelief. Quite embarrassing to admit defeat without fighting. Mistress, sect master, when he was young, watched the battle from afar and said calmly, "Beautiful woman in the Marquis. The three of them have a chance of winning?" And had a deep impression of her. Master. At that time, do you think the three of them together mistakenly called her master's wife? Xiao Wuming was caught by directly and beaten for a long time. He didn't agree with this battle just now and talk nonsense. If it was a battle of two different levels, reprimanded him lightly. Not to mention Ningchen. He did not argue with the child and said calmly, "Even he wouldn't have much interest in fighting. Where is Miss Qing?" 3 years after Master left and didn't say anything else. On the martial stage at the peak of the mountain, Xia Qi felt that something was wrong and quickly changed the way he addressed Mu Qingxue. Before their swords arrived, I don't know where Aunt Qing is now. They felt a shocking sword pressure sweeping over. As the swords in their hands were how was he going to return this saber? What a monster! The white clothes scattered and disappeared without a trace. She took a step forward, just like when she leaped into the air. It was so quiet she channeled her energy into her sword and slashed down with the momentum of falling from the sky. The beautiful mistress left just like that. Ningchen was as still as a mountain. In the north of the Migres dynasty, he used his fingers to block the sword. Who had been traveling for more than 10 days, couldn't even move half arrived an inch. At an ancient small city. Just at this moment, the autumn rain blurred their vision. Edge appeared the behind small city with a long history so fast that it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Ningchen turned his body and used his fingers to deflect the force. They worked when the sun rose and rested when the sun set. It was
with
like
a
a paradise
sound that was rarely disturbed by the
Ning-Chen waved his
disputes of the
hand and
outside
knocked
world.
Jian Shui
As
out
soon
of the
as
battle.
Ning-Chen walked into the
Seeing
small
that the
city,
situation was
he immediately
unfavorable,
felt a bone-deep
Xuan
pressure.
didn't continue
His expression
fighting.
immediately
He used
turned
the
solemn.
advantage of his body
Xiantian
and condensed his
There was no
quintessence to draw
mistake.
lightning into
Falsehood
his
could
sword.
not be captured.
Ning-Chen squinted
It was
his
exactly
eyes
the
and
same
his red
feeling
clothes
when the teacher
instantly
stood in
disappeared.
front of him.
When he reappeared,
If he did not have the
he was
body of a
already in
phoenix,
front of the former.
he might not even
He
be able to
condensed his
detect
quintessence
it.
and
The
blocked
sound
the
of an
sword.
old teacher
With a
teaching in
bang,
a private school.
Xuan flew
The
out
sound
of
of
the
a man
martial
swinging a
stage
hammer
before
in
he
a
could make a
blacksmith
move.
shop.
In the
And
blink
the
of
sound
an
of an
eye,
old monk
only
chanting
by Hangzhu
scriptures
was
in a
left in the
dilapidated
battle.
temple. All of them reached
The
Ning
three young
Chen's
geniuses
ears.
couldn't
It was
last more than a
difficult to
few
distinguish
rounds.
who was
The
real
huge
and who
gap
was
in
fake.
strength was
It was a
revealed
pity
once
for
again.
Hangzhu.
This time,
Although
Jian
Jian
Shui's
Shui's
cultivation
cultivation
was
was
higher.
she looked at the
She was
broken
limited
sword
by
in
her
her physique
hand and
strength.
She
She
didn't
didn't
understand
understand
where
where
the
the
gap
gap
between them
was.
was.
She saw that
By
her young
Hangzhu's
master's
expression
expression
also
was a
flashed
little
with
strange.
confusion.
And
She
immediately
originally
realized
thought
that
there
she
might
could
be
barely
unknown
fight with her
dangers
senior
around.
brother if
We
she
can't
joined
stay
forces.
here for long.
She didn't
Let's
expect the
continue.
gap to be so
Ning-Chen
huge.
originally
The
planned
sword
to
is a
stop
weapon
and
to
rest for
kill.
the night.
Ning
But he
Chen
changed
left
his
his
mind
sentence
at this moment
and walked down the
and
stage.
continued to lead
The
the
gap
three
between
people
them
forward.
wasn't a secret.
Ruashi stopped
It was just that
Ruashi
by
when she was about
Hangzhu,
to ask.
and the others couldn't truly understand it. When they
She knew
experienced
that her
true
young
life
master
and
would
death
not make such a
situations,
decision
they would
easily.
be able to
They
deeply
were afraid that
understand
they
what
were
a
really
sword
in
was
danger now,
and what a weapon
clang.
for killing was. The sound of forging in the blacksmith shop became louder and louder. The
Chapter
sound of the old
419,
monk chanting
under the
scriptures
bright
in the
moon.
dilapidated
Ning
temple
Chen was sitting in
also
front of a
became
table
more and
in a
more
wooden
ear-piercing.
house
At the foot of
The
the
old
mountain,
teacher in the
he was
private
polishing
school was
Yama's
also
sword with the
chanting
help of a
sage's
lamp.
scriptures.
The sword had been
Countless
sealed
sounds
for
echoed in
nearly
Ning
10
Chen's
years.
ears.
Aside
city
from
was like
using
a
it to
maze.
scare Black
Half
Tortoise
an hour
a few
later,
days ago, the four
he
people
hadn't
returned
used it
to their
again.
original place.
When fighting with others,
they were unable
swords
to
and
move
blades
half
were
a step
ruthless.
forward.
Injuring
Only
and
then
killing
did
were
Ruashi
just a
and
matter
Jian
of
Shui
thought.
realize
killed
that
too
something
many
was wrong.
people.
It
And
was
didn't want to
impossible
stain
to
the
get
sword in
lost
his
in the
hand
Xiantian
with
blood
realm.
again. They were
Hopefully,
obviously trapped
in
in
this
the
100
game of
empire
the strong.
competition,
All forms
this
are
sword
falsehoods.
wouldn't need to be unsheathed
If you see
again.
that all forms are
The
not
reason
true,
he came to
then you
nailing
will
this
see the
time
Buddha was to find
At
a
this
way to
moment,
awaken
the ancient
Ghost
city
Girl.
changed.
He owed too
Golden
many
light
favors in this
sprinkled
life.
down.
As
No
the
matter what
venerable
method
of the
he
world
used,
chanted,
he had to wake her up.
Buddhist rain
Young
fell
master,
from the sky.
are you still not going
purifying
to
the
rest?
sins of the
The
world.
wooden door creaked
However,
as Ruashi
only the
walked
four
in and
people
asked
could hear and
softly,
see it.
I'm just
Endless
about to
phoenix
rest.
fire rose
By the
around
way,
Ning Chen's body.
Hangzhu and I will be
protecting
leaving
the
in 3
three
days.
people around him
You should come with
and
us.
resisting the
Ning Chen
purification
said,
of the Buddhist
this
rain.
time it's a serious
Sub-Hoodie,
matter.
If you are a
Ruashi
kind
won't be
man
going.
or a kind
I'll
woman,
be a burden to you.
will recite this
Ruashi
scripture.
smiled gently.
If you are a
It's
contemptible
fine, it's
person,
decided.
then you
Ning
will have
Chen knew
sinned in
Ruashi's
your previous
worries
life
and didn't say
and will
anything
fall
more.
into the evil path.
Manling was different
Since
from
you
the
are a
divine
contemptible
continent.
person in
In
this
this
world,
strange place,
the sins of your
Ruashi only
previous
had him
life
to
will be
rely on.
eliminated. He couldn't
You will
leave
be
her
worthy of
alone.
Anytar
Moreover,
Sub-Hoodie.
without this girl by his
Sub-Hoodie,
side,
if
he
I
wouldn't
recite
feel
the
at
past,
ease along the
the
way.
infinite monk is
Ruashi's
only a
eyes
tribulation.
flashed with a trace of
Therefore,
joy. Before
although
the lamp
she
of
didn't
Buddha,
want to cause
it
trouble
is
for
worth
the young
84
master.
quadrillion. She still
All
wanted
the
to go
Buddhas
with
of
him.
his will have
Dang,
provided
dang.
for me.
At this
If
moment,
there is someone in the
there was a
future
knock on
who
the
can
door,
recite this
and a
scripture,
pleasant voice sounded.
then the merit gained
Senior
will
brother,
not be worth
are you
1
resting?
quadrillion of the
It's
merit
Hangzhu.
gained by all the
Ruashi
Buddhas I have
whispered.
provided for.
Ning Chen frowned.
Sub-Hoodie,
Why did she
if
come
you are
down
a
the
kind
mountain
man
at this
or a
time?
kind woman,
Come in.
you will be able to
Ning
recite
Chen
this
said.
scripture in
Red
the future
Bamboo
and
pushed
gain
open
merit.
the door and saw
If I
Ruashi
speak of it,
inside.
or if
Breathing
someone
a
hears
sigh
it,
of relief,
their heart
she
will be
stepped
in
forward
chaos,
and respectfully
and they will
said,
not believe it.
This red
Sub-Hoodie,
bamboo is here
you
to
will
thank
know that
Senior
the scripture
brother
is
for gifting me
inconceivable,
this sword,
and the karma
thanks
is
to this sword.
inconceivable.
This red
Buddhist
bamboo
rain,
was able to win
lotuses,
today's
golden
battle.
swastikas
The one you
rotated
should
around
thank
the
is
4
not
people.
me.
But
The
your master
incantation
and
became
sect
more
master
and more
Yu Hung.
ear-piercing.
My deal with them is to
Purifying
help
the
you
sins
hung
of
win the
knowing
top 3
destiny.
positions
Ruashi
in this
Jian
100
Shui
empire
and
competition.
Ruashi did not notice
The
it.
stronger you are,
However,
the more
when they
likely
saw
this
Ning
deal
Chen
will
bleeding
succeed.
from his ears,
Ning
they
Chen
were
calmly
shocked.
said,
What happened?
Young master,
Amidst
don't
the
keep
Brahma
people at
rain,
arm's length.
the cries of the
phoenix rang
couldn't
out,
stand it anymore,
and a huge shadow
so she
of the
gently
phoenix
punched her young
appeared.
master and
The red
whispered.
phoenix fire rose
Hongju
again,
didn't forget to come
resisting
over
the
to say
power
thank you
of
even
the
though it's
purifying
already
Buddha's
so late.
words with all its
Don't
might.
treat her like a guest.
The ancient city
She is
turned
still
into
your
a
junior
purgatory.
sister. Ever since the eldest grandson passed away,
The sound of
the
forging
young master's
iron in the
temperament had
blacksmith
become
shop.
even colder.
The chanting of the
she
old
was not
monk
as
in the
good as
ruined
that
temple.
concubine.
The chanting
So she
of
could
the
only
old
try to
teacher
persuade him
private
from
school.
the side. Everything
Have a
turned
seat.
into the Buddhist
Hearing
mantra,
Ruashi's
pressing
reminder,
down from all
Ning
directions,
Chen sighed in his heart
purifying
and
the
softened
evil
his
of the
tone.
world. Hongju gratefully glanced at Ruashi and sat down at the wooden table.
Every time she talked to her senior brother, knowing destiny was in danger, nervous. An ancient sage realm cultivator the wrong thing, who had never been knowing each other for so long, body with the words
although
of Buddha.
her senior brother would answer her questions one by
golden
one.
swastikas
But
appeared
no matter
in the
how
fire,
many times she came,
purifying the sinful,
his
knowing
attitude was
destiny.
no different from
Ning
the
Chen
first time
closed
they
his
met.
eyes as the
It
red
was as
flames
if he
around
was
his
facing
body
an ordinary
continued to rise.
stranger.
He
was
was
trying
trying
his
his best to
You should
resist
give
the
the
saint
sword a
power
name,
of the mantra
said
of
by
atonement.
Hongzhu
softly
Blood
as she
dripped
took
from
out
his
the strange
ears,
sword
eyes,
from
and
its
mouth.
scabbard.
Bodhi
Ning
chanted
Chen looked at the
sutras to
sword in
cleanse
front
his
of
sinful
him
body,
and fell silent.
It was a pity that
After a
Hongzhu
long
and Jian
time,
Shui were shocked.
he opened his mouth
They
and
circulated their
said,
martial
everlasting
arts
fragrance.
to help block the Buddhist
Hearing
mantras
this name that came
Hongzhu
from all
was startled
directions
at first.
However,
But then
it was
a dazzling
useless.
color flashed
They could
in her
only
eyes.
watch as the former held
Everlasting
on
youth.
with great
Is this what it
difficulty.
means?
While
The
blood
name was
kept
simple
flowing
and
easy
easy
to
to
understand.
understand.
Orifices.
It carried the
Seven
most
Buddhas
heartfelt
appeared in the
blessings.
ancient city.
Ning Chen had
Their
given it a
hearts were
name with great
united
care.
as they chanted the
After
Sanskrit
all,
mantra.
they had known
King
each other
Lippo,
for a
King
while.
Lippo, King
Although
Chioha,
they were
King
only
Luo, and
martial siblings
King
in
Nia,
name,
King Pai Lai,
he still
King
sincerely
Mahajia,
wished that
King
the red
Zhenlin,
bamboo
King
of
Qian
regret would
with
be
the
like
seven
a sword
Buddhas
in its
eradicating
scabbard.
sins.
Hongzhu
The
likes
power
this
of
name
Brahma
very
increased
much.
dramatically.
Thank you, senior brother.
Clear Saints Brahma
Hongzhu
chants
softly
passed
said.
through the mortal body.
After saying that,
and reached the
it was a
deepest
pity
part
that
of the
Hongzhu
sinner's
hesitated
consciousness.
for a moment.
Ning Chen
But
let
she
out
still
a stuffy
carefully
groan.
said, finding it
Hongzhu
even harder
understands
to
a little
hold
of
on.
what senior
Blood
brother
dripped
said
down
on the
from his
competition
7
platform
orifices,
today,
dyeing
but
the
I
ground
can't
in
figure
front
out
of him
what
red.
deeper meaning it
With
has.
the Sanskrit
I
mantra,
hope senior brother
Ning
can
Chen
guide
could no
me.
longer suppress
Senior
the
brother's
murderous
intent
intent
that a sword
he
is
had
a weapon to
suppressed for
kill.
10 years.
But this
in
didn't
an
seem
instant,
to be too
the
difficult
murderous
to understand.
intent surged out.
She also
It was
couldn't
dark
figure
and
out
cold,
why there was such
a
a big
terrifying
gap
force
between
that
them.
could almost
If I wanted to
materialize
kill
rushed
you,
into the
what do you
sky
think your
and
chances of
turned into a
surviving are?
strange giant rock.
Asked Ning Chen as
Buddha
he
is
placed the
merciful.
Yama King's sword
In the
that he had
Sanskrit
cleaned
mantra,
on the table.
the blacksmith,
Not even
the old
10%.
monk,
The old master.
Hongzhu thought for
the
a
Dharma
moment, then
images
spoke
of the
the truth.
Buddhas dissipated.
Although her
in the blink
cultivation
of
was
an
higher
eye,
than her
they
senior
condensed
brothers,
into one
the
and
difference
turned
in
into
their
a
true
white-robed
strength
Buddha.
was too great.
His face was
Today
calm,
on the stage,
without any murderous
the feeling
intent.
of every single
108
move being
prayer
sealed
beads
made them
and
feel
hands
deeply
swayed in the
powerless.
wind.
She
Most
really
of them
couldn't
had changed
understand
color.
why the moves
It was
they had
hard to
bitterly
eliminate
trained
for
for
so
so many
many
years.
years.
And
The
were
Buddha
so
killed
proud
all
of
evil.
were all flaws
Each
in
of
her
the prayer
senior
beads
brother's
that
eyes.
changed color
Could it be that they
represented
hadn't
the
trained
death
enough?
of a great evil.
Wrong.
The
Ning
sage
Chen
appeared.
looked at the woman
He
in
had
front
white
of
hair
him
and a
and
white robe.
explained,
The prayer
Actually,
beads danced in the
it's
air.
extremely
The
difficult to
Sanskrit
kill a
mantra
tree
pressed
disaster
down from
expert.
heaven and earth.
A person's
The
survival
fire
instinct
could not
in
stop
desperate
it.
situations
The
is
supreme
beyond
human
imagination.
being in the realm of
The reason you
consummation
think
showed
so
his
is because
supreme
you've
power.
never
He
experienced
chanted
such
the
a
Sanskrit
desperate
mantra
situation before.
under his merciful
Back
face.
then,
His
in order to
determination
deal with
to
the
kill
dewy
evil
temples
did not
abbot,
change.
the king of
The
calamity,
sage and the sinner
the
fought
martial
without
lord,
words.
and the
The
master of the
Sanskrit
4
mantra
extreme
circled,
realms,
and the
it had
phoenix
been
fire
extremely
rose.
difficult.
They collided
Even though he had
violently
repeatedly
among
set
the
up backup
108
plans,
rosary
when
beads.
it came to the actual
The one
battle,
that symbolized the knowing
unexpected
destiny
variables
state
had still
been
appeared.
corrupted by half.
Great evils must
They were
be
like
punished
that,
and should
he
not
was
be
the same.
tolerated.
In desperate
Lippo
situations,
Lippo Emperor,
in order to survive,
Chiohi
a
Emperor,
person's
Luo and
willpower and
Emperor,
potential would
Emperor
become
Meha
incomparably
Luo,
terrifying.
Emperor Pai Lai,
It wasn't
Emperor
even
Mahajia.
impossible for them to reverse the situation of the battle.
Zhenlin
Of course,
Emperor,
if the opponent's strength reached the level of the
wall
Yama
of
King,
incantations
everything
was
would
built
be
amidst
different.
the phoenix flames.
After all,
the golden
difference
swastika
between a
swayed
human and a
between
god
heaven
was
and
not
earth,
something
trapping
willpower
the
could
sinful
change.
body.
Your
Trapped,
sword will
the phoenix let out a
become the
deafening
last
shriek.
thing you can rely
Inside
on
the phoenix,
when you're in the most
ghostly
dangerous
lady
situation.
in the ice coffin was
At that
affected by
time,
the holy
the
power.
essence of the sword
and her
will be
ghostly
extremely
aura was
clear.
showing signs of
Kill your
dissipating.
opponent and survive,
Ning Chen sensed
said
this
Ning Chen
and was
calmly.
enraged.
No one
His
would think
eyes
about
that were dripping
nonsense
with
like
blood suddenly
benevolence,
opened.
righteousness,
In an instant,
and morality
the
when they were
strange
in
rock
desperate
let out a long
situations.
cry and rushed
He
into the
couldn't do
9
that.
heavens.
And those
Heaven and
legendary
earth
ancient
sensed this
sages
and
couldn't do
thunderclouds
that
rolled,
either.
covering
Hongzhu
the sky
seemed to
and sun.
understand, but she didn't.
Buddha, you are going
Confusion
too far.
flashed through her eyes
With a
and
rumble,
she said,
the fifth
Hongzhu
Khanate
still
tribulation,
doesn't quite understand.
the Blackwater tribulation,
What does this have to do with the
reappeared in
difference
the
in
world.
strength between
Mysterious
me and
rain
senior
fell
brother?
from the sky,
Ning Chen
annihilating
wasn't in a
everything.
rush. The entire
patiently
ancient
said,
city was
"Answer the
engulfed by the
question I
great
just
calamity.
asked you again."
Water droplets
There's not
fell
even
like
a 10%
mountains and
chance.
houses collapsed.
Hangzhou didn't
It was like the
understand,
end of the world.
but she still
The
answered
ancient
according
city
to her
suffered a
senior brother's
calamity,
words.
and the ground cracked.
In truth, from
The
my
cracks
point of
spread
view,
out for 50
it's not
kilometers.
that you don't have a 10%
When the Buddha saw
chance.
this, he couldn't
But
bear
from your
it.
point of view,
He waved his
that's
prayer
the only
beads and
answer.
changed his
That's
incantations.
the difference between us
Buddhist
right now.
incantations
Ning Qin
converged into a
paused,
curtain
thought for a
that
moment,
covered the sky
and then
above the
explained,
ancient city.
"The reason
Amidst
you think
the
you don't
phoenix
even have a
flames,
10%
the swastika
chance
chain,
is because you
and the
only see your
incantations
current
lost
strength.
the
You
augmentation
don't
of
see
the
your
Buddha's
potential.
holy power.
However,
They quickly
this
dissipated
potential
in
will
the
only
heavenly
be revealed when
tribulation
you
and
encounter a
disappeared.
true life or death
Let's go.
situation.
After the shackles
You've never
were removed,
experienced such a
Ning Qin
situation
didn't stay
before.
any longer.
So your
The
current
phoenix
strength
spread
is
its
only what
wings
you can see.
and carried the three
But if there
people
comes a
beside
day
him,
when you truly
they
encounter
transformed
a
into
life
a
or
red
death
beam and
situation,
flew away.
if you're lucky
500
enough to
kilometers
survive,
away, The
then
red
remember
beam
everything you felt at that
Ningchen
time.
flipped his palm.
Perhaps it's a
and
move,
sent the three people
perhaps
flying.
it's a comprehension.
His eyes were solemn,
Or perhaps it's
as he
the
looked
mark
at
of
the
each
terrifying
sword.
tribulation
Carefully
in the
remember
sky.
it in your heart
He raised
and
his
learn
hand
it.
and pointed.
Then you can
Sword
completely
beams soared
transform
into
the
the
potential
sky
that
and collided
erupted
with
during
the
that moment
mysterious
of
rain.
crisis.
The rumbling
Into a
collision
part of your
resounded
strength.
through heaven and
Do you
earth.
understand now?
The sword beams and the
Ningchen
mysterious
asked.
rain
On
collided.
the path of martial
and
arts,
a terrifying
talent was
aftershock
indeed
spread
very
out.
important.
Dust and
In
stones
this regard,
tumbled, and the ground
Hangzhou and
collapsed.
Luoxingchen
The
weren't much
last
different.
tribulation of a fifth
However,
tribulation
the decisive
eminence
difference
wasn't
between
the
the
most
two was
difficult
that when
tribulation to
Luoxingchen betrayed the
transcend.
Zhao house.
However,
He
due to
experienced
knowing
too many
destiny's
life and
demonic
death
killing
battles.
intent.
Because
It
of
became
this,
abnormally
his strength also
terrifying.
increased by
The rain
leaps and
fell
bounds.
like a mountain.
In the
Within
end,
the
he
heavenly
was even able to
tribulation's
compete
range,
with several
the
of the
ground
Zhao
collapsed
house's
and was
third disaster
destroyed.
realm giants.
Under the mysterious
Hangzhou
rain,
nodded and couldn't
red
help
robe
but
appeared
sigh in her
extremely
heart.
fast.
These words
The flowing
sounded
light
difficult,
was extinguished
but
as
it was
he avoided
probably
the
even more
endless rain.
difficult to do.
He focused his mind and focused his sword to shake the heavenly tribulation. In the distance, Yin Hangzhou and Jian Shui looked at this terrifying tribulation. Their faces were slightly pale. Only he could survive such a tribulation. An hour later, the dark clouds dispersed and the sun set. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on the damaged ground ahead. It was indescribable shock. On the destroyed ground, Ningchen looked at the ancient city in the distance. His eyes shone. It was not a fortunate thing to encounter such a powerful person in this place. Let's go. Let's continue on our way. Ningchen's figure flashed and walked in front of the three. He called out to them, and then continued to walk north. According to the journey, the gathering place of the 100 Dynasties competition should not be far away. He hoped that he would not encounter trouble like today. In the homeland of West Buddha, in the ancient land of Chongling, Sui was cultivating with her eyes closed in the ancient formations. She had not come out for 10 years. She had once made a promise that could not be shaken. Not far away, Nu Chong looked at the young person in the formation. Light flashed through her eyes. In a few more days, the life scroll would be peeled off. This person's mind was really impressive. It was not easy for her avatar to enter the realm of great perfection. This meant that this person had to cultivate again and again. Such pain and loneliness was not something that ordinary people could endure. Actually, to him, handing over the cultivation method of the birth scroll would allow him to obtain a few tens of years, or even 100 years of freedom. Unfortunately, a promise from when he was young actually allowed him to persist until now. Whether he was stubborn or inflexible, it wasn't important now. At this moment, a strange phenomenon appeared in the heavens and earth far away. Almost at the same time, the divine palace, the demon temple, and the giant dragon gate manifested and solidified. The purple celestial palace and the demon Buddha had improved further. They were not far from breaking into the next realm. At this moment, every powerful person in the homeland of West Buddha felt something. They looked at the divine palace and the Yao temple with grave expressions. They are still one step ahead of us. Nu Chong narrowed her eyes. These two people had seized most of the original power of the divine land of the eastern region. They were one step ahead of everyone else on the road to the next realm. Whether she could catch up or not depended on whether this person could help her cultivate this avatar to the realm of great perfection as soon as possible. On the peak of Tianfu Mountain, the legendary Zhangguang Zun and the Abyss ancient sword flattened the smoke in beacons. Their clothes were torn apart, and their hair fluttered in the wind. The undecided contest shocked the master of the competitive edge pavilion, the master of the discipline pavilion, and the other powerful cultivators of Tianfu Mountain. In 10 years, this terrifying swordsman had become stronger. Although his cultivation was still lingering on the edge of the third disaster, his combat strength had surpassed all the powerful people of the third disaster realm. He was close to the realm of great perfection. It was hard to believe that there was such a legendary person in this world. His speed of growth was amazing. After the duel ended, the light sage waved his hand and put away the quelling beacon. He looked at the man in front of him, and a smile of praise appeared on his young face. He said, "Your attainments in the sword are truly astonishing. In a few more years, even this monk might not be your opponent. You're too kind, Light Zun." Yanqing Prince waved his hand, and the Abyss ancient sword flew back to the sword rack. On the side, Man stepped forward and carried the sword rack on her back. Senior, I don't want to stay here. Let's go down the mountain, said Man softly. Huh? Yanqing Prince chuckled. He could tell what this girl was thinking at a glance. If she didn't want to stay, then let's go. Little benefactor Wild, would you like to consider joining my Buddhist sect? The light reverend walked up with a smile. No. Man hurriedly shook her head. I don't want to cut my hair. You don't need to cut your hair. You don't need to eat meat. You can get married, you can fight, and you can go down the mountain whenever you want. How about it? Light Zun smiled. He blocked all the reasons this girl had for refusing him all these years. No. Man couldn't think of any other reason to refuse, but she still shook her head decisively. Not far away, the hall master of Competitive Edge Pavilion and Discipline Pavilion were sweating. Light Zun really dared to agree to any condition to trick this girl into joining the Buddhist sect. However, to tell the truth, let alone Light Zun, even they couldn't help wanting to snatch such a genius. Seeing that Man wasn't willing, Light Zun didn't force her. He looked at the man next to him and said, The 5 regions have already merged. Perhaps the Great Circle isn't the end. Although your sword has reached the peak, it doesn't mean you have no opponents. The path of using the sword to prove your Tao is rugged and difficult. Since ancient times, very few people have succeeded. I hope you can use the sword in your hand to create your own Tao and become a sword sovereign as soon as possible. Many thanks. Yanqing Prince calmly thanked him. Then he glanced at the girl next to him and called out, Man, let's go. All right. Man nodded. She smiled at Light Zun and the hall master of Competitive Edge Pavilion and Discipline Pavilion and walked over. After the two of them left, the hall master of Competitive Edge Pavilion and Discipline Pavilion walked up and respectfully bowed. Light Zun, the 100 Empire competition in Southern Tomb is about to begin. You should send one person over, said Light Zun. The Arhat hasn't finished his 100 tribulations yet. It's hard to find him. May I ask who the Buddha is referring to? Asked Hall Master Competitive Edge Pavilion. The current Buddhist lady Wisdom Monarch Aaron, said Light Zun calmly. The Hall Masters of Competitive Edge Pavilion and Discipline Pavilion were startled. The current Buddhist lady was a variable in Buddha Mountain. Although her cultivation base wasn't inferior to the Arhats, once she left the mountain, she could become the source of calamity for Buddha Mountain. In a corner of Buddha Mountain, in a luxurious palace, a woman was doing her makeup in front of a mirror. Her charming face was dazzling, and her rouge made her look absolutely beautiful. Her hair was long enough to reach her waist, and she was exceptionally beautiful. No matter how you looked at her, she didn't look like a Buddhist wisdom monarch at all. After finishing her makeup, the woman stood up. She was dressed in pink, and there was a strange smile on her face that was a bit cold and a bit enchanting. It was hard to tell what she looked like. Wisdom Monarch Aaron walked out of the palace and walked toward the peak of the mountain. Wherever her pink robes passed, flowers bloomed and withered. Light Zun's decree and Wisdom Monarch Aaron leaving the mountain would cause a huge commotion. Chapter 426. Nanling. The day of the 100 Dynasties competition was getting closer and closer. The 4 people heading north were still walking at a leisurely pace, without the slightest impatience. Or rather, if someone wasn't in a hurry, it was useless for others to be anxious. Ningchen, can you walk faster? Jian Shui was so angry that she looked back at the red-clothed man behind her and shouted. The 100 Dynasties competition was about to begin, but they still hadn't reached their destination. The most annoying thing was that this person still didn't know how to be anxious. Bai Hongzhu walked between the two with a headache. She couldn't control Jian Shui, and she couldn't control her senior brother either. Walking fast wasn't good, walking slow wasn't good either. The only one who was relatively quiet was Ruoxi. No matter what, she always followed her young master. When she couldn't stand the noise anymore, she would push her young master a few steps faster to catch up with Shui's pace. Ruoxi, tell him to hurry up. Jian Shui saw someone was still indifferent and shouted at Ruoxi. Young master, why don't we walk faster? Miss Shui is about to die from anxiety. Ruashi suggested helplessly. There's still enough time. Jian Shui's temper is too impatient. She needs to be sharpened. Ningchen said calmly. Once upon a time, he was not much different from this Jian Shui. He was impatient and didn't know when to advance or retreat. At that time, there were seniors to sharpen him. He didn't expect that today, when the roles had changed, he would do the same thing. In front, Jian Shui saw that Ruashi couldn't persuade him. She was full of anger and quickly walked back. She reached out and pulled the former's arm, dragging him forward. Bai Hongzhu stepped aside. This lady was angry and couldn't be provoked. However, no matter how hard Jian Shui tried, Ning Chen's pace was still the same as before. The little girl was anxious. Her eyes were red with anger, and she was about to cry again. Ning Chen closed his eyes and pretended not to see. Crying when you can't beat me. Crying when you can't drag me. How old are you? Jian Shui saw this and became even angrier. She hugged the arm in front of her and bit him. She couldn't wait to bite him to death. Ruashi and Bai Hongzhu saw this and were shocked. They hurried forward and pulled the two apart. Quarreling is quarreling, why did they bite? Young master, please give way to Shui, she's still a girl. Ruashi took out a handkerchief and tried to persuade him while wiping the water stains on the teeth marks. On the other side, Yan Hongzhu also pulled Jian Shui and threatened, Shui, you can't beat senior brother. Be careful of his retaliation. Over the past few days, she had a rough idea of her senior brother's temperament. Although he looked very cold, after interacting with him for a long time, she could feel the gentleness under that coldness. He was strict with himself and lenient with others. Shui was so good at tormenting, and even she couldn't stand it. Yet, her senior brother could still endure it, and didn't get angry even once. This was truly out of her expectations. Let's fight back then. Who's afraid of who? Jian Shui wrinkled her nose and glared at the man beside her with red eyes as she said angrily. Ning Chen took the handkerchief from Ruashi's hand and vigorously wiped the teeth marks left by Jian Shui. As for the evil woman's eyes and crazy words, he pretended not to see or hear them. Ruashi really couldn't control these two ancestors. She took her handkerchief and let them do whatever they wanted. In the end, the struggle was won by Ning Chen, who wasn't afraid of being bitten. The speed of the four people was still neither fast nor slow. Looking at their posture, it was 100% impossible to arrive in advance before the start of the 100 Empire competition. Time passed day by day. Unknowingly, the day of the gathering of the 100 Empire competition was approaching. The four people's journey finally came to an end. In the competition city, the gathering of the 100 Empire competition was glorious and shocking. Wild beasts flew across the sky. Strange beasts pulled carriages, and golden palanquins flew past. The extraordinary momentum set off the strength of the owner. In contrast, the four people who walked here were travel-worn. They really didn't have the temperament of a master. They were not much different from the crowd watching the fun. Jian Shui was so angry that she gritted her teeth and didn't give a certain someone a good face. You're a day early, Ning Chen added in an untimely manner. When Jian Shui heard this, she couldn't hold back the raging anger in her heart. Just as she was about to explode, Hongzhu hurriedly pulled her to the side and painstakingly comforted her. Rumble, horses galloped across the sky. It was unknown which state the great sect came from, but it was unknown which state it came from. 3 unicorns were valiant and imposing. In the carriage, a man in purple and gold clothes looked disdainfully at the heroes of the world. A powerful aura circulated around his body. He had actually set foot in the second disaster, shocking everyone in the city. What are you pretending for? Jian Shui couldn't stand it and contemptuously said, Is the second disaster so great? So what if you have a carriage? Hongzhu was helpless. She didn't point out the little girl's sour grapes. Now that she had poked her sore spot, their following days would be even more difficult. Find an end to rest. Afraid that if he continued to stay, this crazy girl would find trouble and fight with others again, Ning Chen decisively stopped watching the fun and stepped forward. Ruashi and Hongzhu understood tacitly and followed together. However, at this moment a powerful pressure pressed down from the sky. It was the man in purple and gold clothes from before. Hearing Jian Shui's words, he didn't say a word and attacked. The power of the palm was astonishing. Under the storm, Jian Shui was like duckweed in the rain. She didn't even have a chance to resist. In front, Ning Chun, who had walked more than 10 steps away, flashed a cold light in his eyes. His figure moved and instantly turned back. Thousands of sword intent, with a bang, collided with the palm falling from the sky. The two moves collided, and the violent wind and waves surged endlessly, rolling up the red clothes and fluttering in the wind. The little girl's words were unintentional. Your Excellency is more than a generation older than her. Don't you even have this little bit of magnanimity? Ningchen said calmly. Immediately, sword intent surged out from his finger and repelled the man in front of him. The man in purple and gold clothes stood in the void, looking at the young man in red below. His eyes narrowed. What a powerful sword. This person's strength may not be weaker than his. Shui'er, let's go. Ningchen didn't say anything more. He glanced at the little girl behind him and turned to continue walking forward. This time, Jian Shui was more obedient than anyone else. She obediently followed behind him and left together. In this short exchange, all the pairs of eyes in the city had noticed the two of them. Without a doubt, the two of them were opponents that couldn't be ignored in this 100 Empire competition. The four of them had just left when two figures walked out of the city. One was dazzling with golden light, while the other was flawless in silver. As expected, the two geniuses of the Swallow and Song dynasty had both obtained the qualifications to participate in this 100 Empire competition. Nan Mingtian, how was it? Wasn't I right? Bei Gongyu smiled. If such an expert really didn't come, then this 100 Empire competition would lose much of its luster. Let's go say hello. Nan Mingtian still didn't have any expression on his face. Bei Gongyu smiled. This good friend of his was just too serious. He didn't even show his emotions. It was really boring. Ning Chen brought the three of them to an inn. He really didn't want to say anything about the inn's bad taste. 4 rooms. Ning Chen stretched out his hand. No, there's only 2 left. Do you want them or not? The inn was dozing off as he spoke impatiently. I want them. Ning Chen decisively replied. Take out the silver. 1 room is 100 taels, 10 taels for tea. And I don't care about dinner. If you don't check out after 9 in the morning tomorrow, you'll have to add another 50 taels. What a scam! Jian Shui cried out involuntarily. Little girl, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't speak whatever you want. Look at where Mayan is located. Who knows when a guest might get angry and start a fight? Do you think Mayan will be able to keep itself safe if a fight breaks out between Xiantians? This is a high-risk business, so of course the price has to be higher, the innkeeper said seriously. That's reasonable. Ningchen nodded. He took out 220 taels of silver and slapped it on the table. Keep the change. The inn disdainfully glanced at the red-robed youth in front of him. It was rare for someone to be so thick-skinned. Give us 2 rooms. At this moment, 2 figures walked into the inn. There's nothing else. Go to another inn. The inn impatiently waved his hand. Brother Ning, what a coincidence. Bei Gongyu looked at the figure at the counter and smiled. To the side, Nan Mingtian also looked over and nodded. Oh, since you know each other, then it's easy. 2 rooms are enough, and we'll add 20 taels for tea. How about it? The inn immediately took advantage of the opportunity and began to calculate. No, this is something we set first. Jian Shui almost stomped her foot. This was already crowded enough. This black-hearted and only cared about money. In's idea is really good. Brother Ning, we're relying on our friends. Let's squeeze a little. Bei Gongyu smiled. 3 girls to 1 room. And you 3 to 1 room. That's perfect. The inn added fuel to the fire. You'll pay for the rooms. Ning Chen stretched out his hand and took back the silver. Ah, of course. Bei Gongyu agreed and took out an ingot of gold. He placed it in front of the inn and said, Keep the change. Rich people. Ning Chen calmly spat out these 3 words. Everyone could hear the faint envy in his words. On the side, Ruoshi helplessly smiled. Since the time of the Marquis' mansion, the young noble never had more than an ingot of silver on him. However, this couldn't be blamed on her. The monthly salary given by her ladyship was just enough for the mansion's daily expenses. Even if she wanted to give the young noble some more private money, she couldn't. After the rooms were divided, everyone returned to their own rooms. 3 men, 1 room. The silence was a bit scary. Nan Mingtian wasn't a person who liked to talk, and Ning Chen really didn't have much in common with these 2 men. So he just sat at the table and quietly drank tea. 20 taels of silver, it's really dark. Bei Gongyu stood not far away, looking at one and then at the other. He wanted to speak, but the strange atmosphere made him speechless. On the other side, the 3 women carefully listened to the movements next door. They looked at each other with a puzzled expression. Ruashi, do they really know each other? Hongzhu whispered. We've met once. Ruashi hesitated for a moment and tactfully said. Jian Shui rolled her eyes. She was speechless. She really thought these 3 people knew each other. Next door, Bei Gongyu finally couldn't bear it anymore. He stepped forward and said, Brother Ning, let's fight. Chapter 427. In the prosperous era of 100 dynasties, a competition was held. Under everyone's gaze, 100 miles outside of Jingfeng City, a majestic and magnificent divine pagoda slowly rose from the ground. It was 33 floors high and pierced through the clouds. It's starting. Within the inn, Nan Mingtian looked at the divine tower in the distance. He held his sword behind his back and said calmly, Are we going together? The smile on Bei Gongyu's face disappeared. No need. Once we enter the tower, we're not friends. Let's go. Ning Chen stood up and replied. Then he walked out of the room. Senior brother. Outside the room, Yan Hongzhu, Jian Shuier, and the other 2 were already waiting. When they saw the figure walking out, they asked softly, Let's go. Ning Chen replied. On the first floor, the 4 of them walked down. Ning Chen walked to the front of the counter and looked at the shopkeeper, who was calculating on an abacus. He bowed respectfully and said, Shopkeeper, we will be leaving. However, this one's maidservant will still be staying here for a few days. I hope that shopkeeper can take care of her. As long as you give enough money, there's no need to worry about her safety. The shopkeeper didn't raise his head and continued to calculate. Ning Chen nodded. He looked at Ruashi and said, Ruashi, stay here until I come back. With the shopkeeper here, no one will dare to cause trouble. Ruashi will remember. I hope you'll be careful and come back safely. Ruashi's eyes flashed with reluctance. Don't worry, it's just a small matter. A warm smile appeared on Ning Chen's face as he replied. Outside the tower, time was running out. Ning Chen didn't stay any longer and left with Xian Hongzhu and Jian Shuier. Amazing kid. The shopkeeper raised his head and looked at the 3 people who had left. He praised in his heart. In the 100 years that he had been here, this was the first time someone had recognized his identity. On the way, Jian Shuier doubtfully asked, Ning Chen, why are you so respectful to that black-hearted shopkeeper? He's not a black-hearted shopkeeper. He's a half-step perfection sovereign. Ning Chen said indifferently. Jian Shuier was shocked. Was it true? How come she couldn't see through it? Ning Chen didn't say anything more. In fact, even if he couldn't feel the true qi on the shopkeeper's body, he could tell something was wrong. There were countless experts in the city. How could an ordinary person run a shady shop here? It was obvious that those who were looking for trouble had all been killed. In front of the tower of competition, many figures appeared. They were either floating in the air or sitting in chariots. Their powerful auras covered the sky. The peerless geniuses of the southern tomb, and even the 5 regions had gathered to compete. In the distance, Ning Chen slowly walked over with 2 other people. His aura was as calm as water, without the slightest sharpness, but it made the people in front of the tower look sideways. Yesterday in Xingfeng City, the sword that appeared was extremely extraordinary, perhaps not weaker than the second disaster. Hongzhu Shuier, once we're in the tower, do your best to stay by my side, instructed Ning Chen. Yes. It was a pity for Hongzhu. Jian Shuier nodded. Before proper business, she would not fool around anymore. In the air, In the carriage pulled by the three monarch beasts, the man in violet gold clothes looked down at the young man in red clothes. This time, he would show him what it meant to be a real strong cultivator. On the other side, the void shook, and a woman in light yellow clothes appeared. Nan Mingtian and Bei Gongyu saw her arrive and greeted her. "Greetings, Your Highness. We're not in the palace, so there's no need for formalities," Qi Yinxia said calmly. "Yes." The two stood up and said, "Is the person you're talking about here?" Qi Yinxia asked. "He's here. It's the red-clothed man in front." Bei Gongyu moved aside and replied. In front of the tower, Ning Chun felt an unusual gaze behind him. He turned around and suddenly, his body trembled violently, disbelief in his eyes. "What's wrong?" Seeing her senior brother lose his composure like this for the first time, Huan Hongzhu subconsciously followed his gaze. When she saw the woman behind Bei Gongyu and Nan Mingtian, she could not help but frown. The Tianshu royal family. It's not her. After staring for a while, Ning Chun withdrew his gaze and sighed in his heart. Although the appearance was similar, it was indeed not her. Fan Lingyue's last soul had already passed away, along with the bright and chaotic scrolls, during the underworld king's tribulation. Even if a similar flower bloomed in the world, it could not be that extraordinary woman who had single-handedly turned the world upside down. "Senior brother, do you know the daughter of the Tianshu royal family?" Huan Hongzhu asked softly. "I don't know her. I just thought of an old friend when I saw her." Ning Chun collected his thoughts and replied. A strange look flashed across Huan Hongzhu's eyes. She did not ask any more questions. She really could not imagine what kind of person could make her senior brother care so much and remember her in his heart. Behind Bei Gongyu and Nan Mingtian, Qi Yinxia's eyes narrowed slightly. This person's gaze just now seemed to be very shocked. It seemed that there was an unusual story behind this. Rumble. At this moment, in front of the Tower of Excellence, the two large stone doors slowly opened, symbolizing the reopening of the 100 Dynasties competition after 60 years. Immediately, everyone's expression turned serious, and they turned into flowing lights and quickly rushed inside. "Let's go." Ning Chun glanced at the two people beside him before he strode forward. It was a pity for Hongzhu and Jian Shui'er. She was a little nervous and a little curious. Everyone only had one chance in their lifetime to participate in the 100 Dynasties competition that shook the world. Without a doubt, this was the best opportunity to prove themselves. The 33 levels of the tower represented the 33 heavens on the martial path. The first 10 levels were not difficult, and even innate stage cultivators could pass through them. However, after reaching the 11th level, the difficulty would increase exponentially. Only innate stage cultivators could enter. However, for everyone in front of them, the real test began from the 21st level. Under the three disasters, going up would only lead to death. As for the last 31st and 32nd levels, only half sovereigns and peak sovereigns could enter. It was not something that the younger generation, who had not even cultivated for 60 years, could reach. For thousands of years, there had been many geniuses in the southern tomb. There was once a peerless genius who had ascended to the 27th level of the Tower of Excellence with his unparalleled talent, shocking the world. 100 years later, he became a supreme sovereign and was unrivaled in the world. The first level of the Tower of Excellence was a vast and boundless space, a real world. After entering one after another, they did not stop and directly rushed to the next level. "Senior brother, my dear senior brother, can you hurry up?" After entering the tower, seeing that Ning Chun was still in the same unhurried manner, Jian Shui'er forcefully suppressed the rising anger in her body and gritted her teeth as she pleaded. There was a limit to the number of origin heavenly jades on each level of the tower. If they did not hurry up, they would not be able to obtain anything. There's no rush. The origin heavenly jades on the first few levels are just fragments. And with so many people fighting over them, you won't be able to get many. You might as well save your energy and wait until there are fewer people behind you, replied Ning Chun. I'm so angry. Jian Shui'er was about to go crazy. So what if you're good at fighting? So what if you're good at fighting? So what if you're good at fighting? Shui'er listened to senior brother. There's still a lot of origin heavenly jades. There's no rush, comforted Hongzhu. She more or less understood why Ning Chun had allowed everyone to walk behind him. They had already attracted quite a few people's attention in peak competition city. If they showed off their abilities now, they would definitely become a target for everyone. Perhaps with Ning Chun's strength, he didn't need to care about that. But the two of them couldn't. Hongzhu Shui'er, I didn't bring you behind just to avoid fighting. Instead, I wanted you to carefully experience the true extraordinariness of the Tower of Excellence. The 33 levels of the Tower of Excellence are separated from the outside world. It is a world of its own where all living things can flourish. It represents the supreme power of creation. With a human's power, even if they reach the peak of the chosen realm, they might be able to open up space, but they won't be able to create life. Creation is the domain of gods in heaven and earth. It's beyond the power of a human. Just look carefully. Don't try to comprehend it. Just remember as much as you can. Ning Chun calmly reminded the two of them. He had once personally faced the 7 ultimate divine physique created by the Nether King. It was truly terrifying. In order to destroy it and send back the Nether King's will, the divine continent had sacrificed far too many people. Hearing his words, Hongzhu and Jianshuer looked around. However, all they saw was an ordinary world. They couldn't see anything special about it. Ning Chun didn't say anything else. He looked ahead as thoughts flashed through his eyes. According to Sect Master Yu Heng, the first 10 levels of the Tower of Excellence, the middle 10 levels, and the last 10 levels corresponded to humans postnatal, 5 tribulations, and 3 calamities. As for the last 3 levels, ignoring the 33rd level for the time being, the remaining 2 levels required one to be at least a half-step supremacy. To these young geniuses, the 11th to 20th levels, which represented the 5th tribulation realm, might be able to stop many people, but it was impossible for them to stop everyone. According to his calculations, the 21st to 23rd levels should be the limit of most people. After all, these people had only cultivated for a short period of time. They were already impressive geniuses, if they could step into the first calamity. Hongzhu was one of them. The true test was the 24th to 26th levels. Those who could step into these 3 levels were undoubtedly the strongest experts of the younger generation, who had entered the second calamity. There were very few such people, but they were not to be trifled with. Falling Star was at this realm. However, this kid had a star scar bow with astonishing power. When he was ruthless, even he would have a headache. As for the legend of South Tomb, the peerless genius, who had entered the 27th level thousands of years ago, was indeed a little too monstrous. There was nothing much to say about him entering the third calamity at such a young age. The ranking of the 100 Empire competition was based on the total number of levels the 3 people reached. Before this trip, he had promised Sect Master Yu Heng that he would obtain one of the top 3 spots in the 100 Empire competition. Based on this calculation, he had to reach the 24th level at the very least. Furthermore, he had to bring Hongzhu and Jianshuer up. It was a little troublesome, but it wasn't impossible. He only hoped that he wouldn't encounter too many lunatics and would keep going up. Ning Chun walked over with 2 people at the entrance to the second level. At this moment, Qi Yinxia, Nan Mingtian, and Bei Gongyu also walked over. The moment they passed each other, their most unforgettable faces were as calm as water. The familiar face in front of him triggered the deepest memories of his life. Ning Chun sighed softly in his heart. He looked at the woman in light yellow who passed by him and said, "Miss, may I know your name?" "Princess Dubhe Qi Yinxia." Chapter 428. In the Tianshu dynasty, the current Emperor Qi was a man of great talent and bold vision. His cultivation was close to the supreme realm. His 13 children were all extraordinary. The most outstanding one would inherit the throne. It wasn't decided by gender or family background. The most capable one would get the throne. As a woman, Qi Yinxia was able to suppress all the princes and be made the empress. Her amazing talent was evident. Apparently, Huan Hongzhu had heard of her name. Her expression changed slightly. She didn't expect that even Empress Yinxia, whom Emperor Qi valued the most, would come in person. Looking at the woman in the distance, Bai Hongzhu's eyes were full of seriousness. He said, "Senior brother, there may be trouble. Rumor has it that this Empress Yinxia defeated a consecrata of the second disaster of the Tianshu dynasty as early as 7 years ago, shocking the world. Therefore, Emperor Qi directly made her an empress. She is indeed not simple." Ningchen nodded. "Apart from Qi Yinxia, Nan Mingtian and Beigong Yu were also not easy to deal with. Their cultivations were only at the peak of the 5th disaster. But if they really fought, neither of them would be weaker than 3 disasters. On the martial path, there was a kind of person who was well prepared. Once they couldn't wait any longer and really burst out, they would quickly rise to the top. Without a doubt, these 3 people of the Tianshu dynasty would become their strongest opponents." On the second floor, the peaceful world finally changed. The sun was high in the sky and the heat was unbearable. Ningchen looked up at the sky. A strange look flashed in his eyes, creating a world out of thin air. Such an ability was really amazing. Was it natural or a miracle of the gods? Flowers and plants flourished and were exceptionally beautiful. Wherever his clothes passed, the barbs would leave behind scratches. A faint feeling of numbness rose up and penetrated deep into his meridians. The most beautiful flowers were actually poisoned. If one was not careful, they would not be able to return to their own bodies. The dangers that appeared on the second floor warned those who entered the tower that the road ahead would be difficult. They should retreat. Most of the people who went forward had already disappeared. One floor after another, they climbed up. Strong wind, heavy rain, earthquakes and natural disasters appeared frequently. The higher they went, the more difficult it was. However, those who entered the tower were all geniuses of the dynasty. Natural disasters couldn't stop them. They rushed all the way to the 11th floor. Behind them, Ningchen led Lian Hongzhu and Jian Shui forward at a steady pace. Amidst the torrential rain, his black hair and red robes were drenched, making it impossible to see his celestial beauty. In the end, the 2 women were still women. They used their true essence to block the torrential rain. Their clothes were spotless, and they were exceptionally beautiful. They looked like people from a painting. After the torrential rain, the sun shone brightly in the sky. On the red cloak, the rainwater dispersed, and a cool breeze blew past, fluttering in the wind. They had already passed the 10th level. What was about to come was the 11th level, which only connate 5th tribulation eminences could enter. The 3 of them reached the 11th level, and the scene changed instantly. In the dusky world, the demonic chi flashed in the boundless space. It was actually the sign of the heavenly demonic tribulation. The primordial tribulation was a test of one's willpower. If one was unable to guard one's heart, one's cultivation would regress, and one's cultivation would be crippled. In fact, one could even fall into the demonic path and fall into the abyss forever. Above the Xiantian realm, every step was a tribulation. This was vividly displayed in the Tower of Competition. The demonic chi disturbed one's heart, making it difficult for one to move forward. Among the geniuses of the 100 dynasties, there were some whose minds were not strong enough. In the past, they were lucky enough to escape this calamity. Now that they encountered it again, every step they took was flawless. The people who advanced could no longer be as fast as the first 10 levels. Most of them slowed down. No one dared to be careless when facing the demonic tribulation. Amidst the demonic chi, the red cloak advanced. His calm eyes never wavered. He might have regrets in his life, but he had never regretted it. Far away, the pink-dressed bright monarch of Foshan smiled. His Tao heart was pure and flawless, and the demonic chi didn't taint his body. Bright monarch of Alan, who was gradually moving away, was the first to step into the Tower of Competition's lower level. She revealed a peerless beauty that surpassed the geniuses of 100 eras. Following that was the purple golden armored man, who had previously fought Ningchen. Before he disappeared, he turned his head and looked behind him. A cold smile flashed in his eyes as though he was mocking everyone's stupidity. Before long, young geniuses stepped into the 12th level one after another. However, a small number of people couldn't control their hearts and stopped there forever. Lamentable. Ningchen sighed softly as he watched the heartless lose themselves in the endless demonic qi. If one couldn't control their hearts, no matter how fast one cultivated, what was the point? Everyone left. Suddenly, Sword Intent soared into the sky in the silent 11th level, sweeping away the endless demonic qi. In the next moment, the Sword Intent entered one's body, slaying the demonic qi and calming one's heart. At the end of the sword, the red-cloaked figure, who had stepped into the 12th level, didn't look back. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. Whether they could seize the last chance or not depended on themselves. On the 12th level of the Tower of Competition, a demonic general descended to the mortal world. After tempering one's heart, it was the test of one's martial strength. This was much easier for the geniuses of 100 eras. Before long, they rushed to the next level. On the 13th level, heavenly fire burned the world. Everything was annihilated. Waves of fire soared into the sky and sealed the entire world within a world. Qi Yinxia displayed the ability of a peerless heavenly lady. Amidst the light, she walked through the smoke. The heavenly fire around her dissipated and disappeared. Following that, on the 15th, 17th, and 19th levels, the heavenly lightning tribulation, heavenly light tribulation, and mystic water tribulation appeared one after another. They corresponded to the 5th tribulation realm's major tribulations and forcefully stopped the geniuses of 100 eras. Casualties began to appear, especially on the 19th level's mystic water tribulation. More than 70% of the geniuses had clearly reached their limits and found it difficult to advance. The dense mystic water tribulation was heavier than a mountain. Jian Shui's cultivation was also at the 5th tribulation realm. Facing the mystic water tribulation again, she still found it very difficult. Upon seeing this, Ningchen took a step forward and condensed a sword with his fingers. Sword beams soared into the sky. The two of them shared the tribulation, increasing their strength. The rumbling shook the world, shocking countless gazes. Outside the Tower of Competition, thousands of miles away, human supremes were watching the commotion in the tower. It was already the 19th level. They wanted to see if a surprising young expert would appear this time. Young master. In Competition City, Ruoshi stood in front of the window of her room. She looked at the divine tower that pierced into the clouds 50 miles away. A faint look of longing flashed across her beautiful eyes. 4 days had passed. How much longer would it take? On the 19th level, Ningchen stood up and blocked the heavenly tribulation. The heavenly tribulation's might was infinitely approaching in the world inside and outside the tower. Thunder shook the sky, and the mystic rain shocked the gods. Let's go. The mystic water tribulation was endless. They couldn't stay for long. Ningchen calmed himself down. Sword Intent circled around his body, blocking the falling rain. Then his figure flashed, and he quickly rushed to the entrance of the next level with Jian Shui. Yen Hongzhu didn't hesitate and immediately followed. As soon as they stepped into the 20th level of the Tower of Competition, a divine general attacked. The mystic water tribulation was a strange creature that was 100 feet tall and heavy. Its might was astonishing. With a step, the earth trembled. Ningchen knew that Jian Shui had reached her limit. He didn't hide anymore. Sword Intent rose from his body, and he slashed the mystic water divine general. A red light flashed as he moved forward quickly. Yen Hongzhu followed behind. Worry flashed across her eyes. She knew that Shui couldn't move forward anymore. Shui after entering the 21st level, stay for 10 breaths. Immediately crush your competition pearl and leave the tower. At the entrance of the 21st level, Ningchen looked at the woman beside him and instructed seriously. Although the ranking of the 100 Empire competition was important, he couldn't let Jian Shui take the risk. After entering the 21st level, it would be the domain of the 3 disaster realm. Shui's cultivation was too low. If he couldn't protect her for a moment, her life would be in danger. Alright, I'll wait for you outside the tower. Be careful. Jian Shui knew that if she continued, she would become a burden. This time, she didn't act willfully and obediently nodded. The 3 of them entered the 21st level. In an instant, boundless karmic flames swept over. The first of the 3 disaster tribulations, karmic flames, reappeared in the world. 10 breaths was the shortest time for the competition pearl. Once it was crushed, the result would be decided. The karmic flames burned the sky and boiled the sea, forming the most terrifying scene. Layers of sword intent blocked the surroundings, giving Jianshui, 10 breaths of time. Take care. After 10 breaths of time, Jianshui, glanced at the two of them one last time. Then, she clenched her fist and crushed the competition pearl in her hand with a crack. With a flash of white light, Jianshui's figure gradually dissipated. In an instant she disappeared. After Jianshui left, Ning Chen's expression became serious. His sword intent surged around him, shaking away the karmic flames surging from all directions. The 21st level. The true test began now. Hongzhu, stay by my side, Ning Chen said. He looked at the path blocked by the karmic fire. He raised his right hand and sword intent gathered in the sky. In an instant a blood-red sword light rose. The sword split open the sky, and everything within 100,000 feet of it was silent and annihilated. The power of one sword was shocking. On the same level, the peak geniuses of the younger generation sensed it and became serious. 10,000 swords opened the path, and the karmic flames were difficult to block. Ning Chen no longer hid his strength, and his speed increased. He quickly brought Hongzhu to the entrance of the 22nd level. Someone's reached the 22nd level. The moment the entrance to the next level opened, everyone sensed it. Who could it be? 21 Origin heavenly jades flew out. Just as they were about to scatter, they were quickly collected by a ray of red light. In the next moment, Hongyi disappeared and entered the next level. It's him. Not far away, Qi Yanxia saw the eye-catching red light. She narrowed her eyes and did not delay any longer. Her quintessence surged rapidly. She flipped her delicate hand and sent out a palm strike, instantly opening the path ahead. A faint yellow light flashed and entered the next level. Then 2 figures, one gold and one silver, followed. Almost at the same time, several other geniuses broke through the karmic flames and quickly entered the next level. On the 22nd level, the world was vast and in a mess. The ground was riddled with holes, and sword marks cut through a 1,000-foot-long gully. However, the 2 figures were already gone. So fast. A strange look flashed in Qi Yanxia's eyes. She stepped forward and turned into a beam of light, quickly chasing after them. At the entrance to the 23rd level, the ground rumbled. The stone door opened, and the Origin heavenly jades flew out. Then they were all collected again. Ning Chen, who was using his full strength, was astonishingly fast. One level after another, he did not stop. Senior brother, I can't accompany you anymore. Be careful, Qing Yanxia said softly. In front of the entrance to the 24th level, Qing Yanxia, Hongzhu said softly. The next level was a place where only the experts of the second calamity could enter. If she continued to follow, she would undoubtedly bring a heavy burden to her senior brother. However, at this moment, an indifferent voice sounded out. Immediately, a boundless palm energy that could topple mountains and overturn seas attacked the two of them. Want to leave? It's too late. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.